Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, did you prefer Phil Mickelson on the Manning cast tonight, or were you a bigger believer in Phillip Rivers just becoming all teeth at this point?
The Phillip Rivers horse is like a meme that needs to be revived, because like that was pretty good for a while. No, actually, I didn't watch the Manning cast this time. The controller for the TV was on the other side of the room, and so that was that. I watched the regular broadcast, and I regretted every second of it.
I ended up watching the regular broadcast for the first quarter, maybe I think it was through the first half. I ended up watching it, and as soon as I heard Booger McFarland's voice, I went, "Oh God, that's right. I should be watching something else right now." So I switched it over.
It was like bad. Like obviously there's a lot of broadcasts that are like subpar, but they were just like giving like incorrect advice and breaking down things in ways that were like the opposite of true. Like, it's not that you were breaking down things and you were wrong. It's that the conclusion that you reached is the exact opposite direction you would need to walk in order to find the right one. It was just nuts how bad it was.
So you were listening to the regular broadcast when they started going off on quoting Step Brothers, right?
Yeah.
That was either a new high or a new low for the show, depending on your point of view. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. It is episode 400 around here, so we're going to take a bit of a victory lap in the mailbag, and this one will go. This episode will go a little longer than most. We've got a special guest for the mailbag as well, and we have a Vikings game to review. Kind of an afterthought in the intro, but the Vikings won. They snapped their slide in a way that still confuses me, because I don't see what they did differently here, other than airing it out. But we'll talk about it here in just a bit. So, but again, thank you guys for listening to Norse Code. If you would like to donate to the show financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and get bonus episodes there for $3.50 a month. You can get bonus episodes of the show, of Arif and I just ranting about stuff. And a massive bonus episode is coming this week for those who are subscribed to Patreon. So check that out. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well and donate. That's more of a one-time donation. Or you can be like so many amazing people and go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up your t-shirt or baby onesie, or a new t-shirt this year is the Arif, or the other Arif, whichever one makes you buy it is how I want to pronounce it for you. But go ahead and check that out. norsecode.patreon.com is our Patreon, but norsecode.threadless.com is where you can pick up the shirt. So check that out. Again, we don't make a lot of money off those or anything. It's just something fun for us to do. And we may have a new shirt for next year. Still in discussion about that, but we'll tackle that in the mailbag. Let's get over to the actual show itself and get into the review of the Vikings game, because this was a game that the Vikings won. And on paper, you'd be looking at the stats going, well, this is one of the worst defenses in the league against the run. The Vikings seem to have a semi-competent run game, so this should be a no-brainer. Instead, the Vikings aired it out, and the Vikings won.
Yeah. It's the thing is, like, this kind of resembles a lot of the games that the Vikings performed the past 2 years, right? It's just we haven't seen that game from them this year, and we've seen so many frustrating things. Plus, there's like a feeling surrounding Cousins. Like, just there's this vibe that Cousins is a conservative quarterback, and this year he's very much lived up to that. But in previous years, he took more chances, both in terms of challenging tight windows and in terms of throwing deep. And so there was always this kind of discordance between what he was doing on the field and the way we kind of felt about his style of play. And when those two kind of overlapped this year, it's been nothing but like ugly football that's like sucked to watch. And so him finally going back to what he was doing feels like a surprise, because it feels like he always plays conservative, right? Even if he hadn't previously. But also we know that he can be successful at that style of play, and lo and behold, the Vikings were. And the thing is, when we say that like the Vikings aired it out, like that's pretty relative to what we've seen over the past like month of Vikings, or I should say the whole season, right? Because like the average depth of target for Cousins was not like dramatic. Like there are games this weekend where like quarterbacks threw like an average depth of target of something like 10, 11 yards in the air. Lamar Jackson averages 11 yards depth of target. But Cousins was like less than 7. Like it just was not a huge deep passing game overall. It's just that he took more shots in this game, right? And so because of that, especially on like second, third down, when you needed to get more distance, the Vikings were able to convert. There were a couple of shots to Jefferson that converted on third down, which was really nice to see. There was even one deep to Jefferson that didn't count. It was a penalty, so it helped move the offense down the field, which, you know, should become part of the calculus. Like we talk about like how quarterbacks calculate risk a lot. And one of the things that we don't really talk about that much is the odds of a pass interference play. And that's actually like pretty important to like the way it works out, because there's a lot of pass interference plays deep because you tend to only throw deep when you've got a receiver open. And if a receiver's open, very often the defensive back has no idea where the ball is, and so they assume that it's going to be like relatively accurate. The receiver's acting like the ball is coming. The defensive back commits an act of pass interference, and we all know that like catchability just like doesn't matter in the NFL anymore for that, you know, penalty. And so part of our calculus should be, you know, what are the odds that it's caught and completed, and you know, yards after catch and all that. What are the odds it's intercepted, which is much more likely on deep passes. Less damaging, but more likely on deep passes, and kind of what are the odds that it's incomplete, and if it's like on third down, is that incompletion going to be kind of devastating to us? And so having that along with the successful completions to Thielen, the crazy Conklin 20-yarder, having just a couple of those deep throws helped out the offense enough while it still remained like a largely conservative-ish offense, right? Like they still decided not to air it out all that much. I think in terms of the total number of deep shots, I think Cousins only had like 3 total deep shots, got like 54 yards on them. And that doesn't include the Jefferson play. So like 4, including the penalty. But yeah, they were willing to do it. They challenged intermediate a little bit more often. They still like threw a number of screens. But the fact that they mixed in more aggressiveness allowed this offense to, I think, be a little bit more consistently competitive. Or like the alternate explanation is that like they sacrificed the first drive score in order to be able to score at any other moment in the game.
Yeah, I don't think it works necessarily like that, but I want to believe that it does.
It feels like it does, so therefore it's true.
Yeah, there's that. It's funny to me because, you know, you're mentioning like, you know, they got back to where they were on this, or like Cousins kind of got back to what he had done a bit in the past. It felt a bit like there's a Scrubs episode from kind of earlier in the run, and I think it was Elliot all of a sudden forgot how to intubate somebody. Like she couldn't do it anymore, which is something that like med school students learn on like their first day. And all of a sudden, like she like couldn't do it. All of a sudden, you know, by the end of the episode, she can do it again. And Dr. Cox goes, "Congratulations, you are exactly where you were 3 years ago." It felt a bit like that, as all of a sudden, like Cousins was airing it out, and you could interchange Jefferson for Diggs at that moment, because it was everything that was being tossed in his direction, he was just coming down with. It didn't matter. Like at one point, I was a bit worried because of one of the bad falls that Jefferson had.
That's
because
right.
It looked a bit like the way he was holding himself. It could have been like a groin pull or like a stomach muscle or something that might have been bothering him. But boy, he just kept going. And I don't know if it was if there was any sort of additional motivation, the fact that he was playing against the guy who won Rookie of the Year last year. And all of a sudden he was, you know, making terrible throws and making terrible decisions out there. But boy, Jefferson wanted to make a statement.
Yeah, no, for sure. That it very much seems like, I don't know that the Rookie of the Year stuff was all that important, although it would have been fun to ask him now that I think about it. But But I think it's definitely something for like the Vikings fans that cared about that, which I think there's like a good number of them, right? Because it was kind of an interesting debate.
It was crap. It was absolute crap.
I mean, it's one of the things that we rehashed with the guests last episode. But like, I mean, Jefferson was one of the best receivers in the NFL last year. Herbert was not one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL last year. No need to like rehash it a 50th time. But it was nice to kind of see that play out the way it did, I think, for Vikings fans. I mean, Jefferson ended up with like 140-ish yards, 143. It was like a huge kind of re-emergence, like a re-establishment of the kind of player that he is. You didn't need it, right? Because like he's among one of the record holders for most 100-yard games. I think it's like him and Odell Beckham have the most 100-yard games within their first 25 games or something like that. Maybe first 25 starts. And if that's the case, you're kind of goosing things a bit in Jefferson's favor. Either way, pretty like good reminder of the kind of player that Jefferson is. And I think both in terms of the total production and the way that he produced. I mean, some of those catches were really, I think he had 2 really phenomenal catches in the game that were like, oh, I remember this about him in a way that you didn't really feel in some of these previous games. Not that, he was necessarily playing poorly or that he did have a bit of a drop problem, but more like when there's a throw that for whatever reason, maybe Cousins was inaccurate on that play, or maybe he was hitty as he was thrown, or it's off platform, whatever, right? He has the ability to make the quarterback look good. And that's been kind of a theme for Vikings receivers since Diggs has kind of established himself. Like Diggs and Thielen basically established themselves as high quality players at the same time in 2015. And they've been able to make the quarterback look good when the throw wasn't good. And that's kind of something that Jefferson demonstrated in this game. And it's kind of interesting because going into the game, apparently Zimmer told Jefferson that week that they were going to develop a game plan to get him the ball a little bit more often. And then Zimmer kind of revealed that Jefferson was getting frustrated, which of course is like its own storyline. Is he frustrated like a normal receiver might be frustrated that is that talented, or is it
all
like,
the vague tweets are incoming?
Right, exactly. And as far as I know, all of Jefferson's tweets are very scrutable and readable, and you don't have to pull out like a cryptography manual in order to try and figure out what he's saying. But that could change over time, right? It's only his second year. But because Diggs wasn't doing this until his second contract, so we've got time. But the idea that Jefferson is frustrated, plus, I mean, there are like moments where like last year, obviously there weren't any fans in the stands, and so sometimes the mic would catch up these moments. There was one moment in particular that kind of went around Vikings Twitter with Jefferson swearing at Kirk, and you always want to kind of figure out how much of this is like fairly typical football, players' emotions are running high. They just do these sorts of things. Remember all the times Adam Thielen and Kirk have yelled at each other or whatever. And how much of this is like, oh boy, there's truth to all rumors, Diggs. Like what's going on? Which one is which? And it's kind of tough to figure out, but there's like another element to that, or I shouldn't say another element, but there's another piece of that kind of story developing, whether it's benign or not, when Zimmer kind of reveals that Jefferson was frustrated. Now, my take on Diggs was always that Diggs cared more about winning than he did about production, but he cared a lot about production in situations where he thought he should have gotten the ball and they lost. Like he wanted an opportunity to kind of help the team win. And so if he wasn't getting the ball and they lost, he was particularly frustrated. And that could be the case with Jefferson too. So we'll see. If that ends up becoming a thing, or maybe we won't. Maybe Jefferson will continue to have like 150-yard games from here on out. But that's kind of an interesting part of the storyline. But yeah, Jefferson was targeted 11 times, had 9 receptions. I think Thielen was targeted more than 5 times because he had 5 catches. But probably like 7 targets. Maybe one of them was a throwaway. But yeah, Thielen's targets were not as kind of deep downfield as Jefferson's were. There's some after catch stuff that they expected Thielen to do, which in fairness, they expected Jefferson to do some after catch stuff as well. But definitely a game where they wanted to involve those playmakers more. They still found ways to spread the ball around. I mean, there's like a couple of targets to Cook, a target or so to Madison. I think the very first pass of the game was one to Chris Herndon. Captain Ham showed up a little bit. Although
one
the touchdown was taken away.
Yeah, one reception and one should have been a touchdown. And I don't want to hear any of this crap about how the penalty was necessary because otherwise it would have been a sack on Cousins. No, Cousins, that because it was going to Ham, the defender was going to freeze in time temporarily and then be able to lob it up. Cousins would be able to lob that up over to Ham. That was the fact that they had it looked like a designed Ham play there. It
did. I think it was.
Blew my mind. The problem is that I had no chance to celebrate that because the flag I think came in before he even caught it. And so it was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Ham got a touch. Oh, it was a penalty. Like, no, there was no moment of that. It was, oh, there's a penalty. Oh my God, Ham scored that one.
That's exactly how it was.
The ham shirt did me proud, so I was pleased about that. But let's talk about let's talk a bit more about the offense because it seemed like, and the narrative has now become that the Vikings were taking more chances, being more aggressive.
Yeah, and there was a couple of ways they were doing that. They were challenging tighter coverage a little bit more often. And I could probably take a look at the next gen stats actually on this one because this one's interesting. Cousins I think it was the loss to Dallas, was the least aggressive quarterback in terms of challenging tight windows. Now there's a bunch of ways that you can calculate aggressiveness. One of them is to take a look at deep shots, but another one is to take a look at how often he targeted a receiver when that receiver was within 1 yard of a defender. And Cousins was the least likely to do it. But there's even I just headed over to Next Gen Stats already, and one of the sidebar videos right now is Kirk Cousins' 3 most improbable completions. And the way that they calculate improbable completions essentially not only includes how far downfield it is and the distance to the sideline and whether or not there was pressure, but also, the distance to the defender. So we can already tell just from the fact that video exists, right, is that that Cousins was like a little bit more aggressive. So his aggressiveness index for the season thus far. And again, this is not like a quality indicator, right? Like quarterbacks that you think of as aggressive, you usually think of because they throw deep. But Jared Goff and Josh Allen are like right next to each other in aggressiveness index. This is only about tight window throws. And Patrick Mahomes is the least aggressive, mostly because when he's throwing deep, there's no one near Tyreek Hill, right? So Cousins' aggressiveness, it's about average for the season, but for week 10, we can take a look at it. And it was the 5th most aggressive quarterback of week 10 with a 21.6% rate of aggressive throws. And so again, that's just about how close the defender is, not how deep downfield it was. But that's something that, he consciously tried. I think there's a really good Matt Waldman video about Cousins kind of fitting in. And it's a great throw, but Cousins fitting in a throw to the seam to convert. That he just wasn't doing earlier in the year between 2 defenders. And so that's part of it. But also, like we already talked about, of course, how he was willing to take shots a little bit further downfield outside of the opening drive. That's the other thing, is that Cousins has been aggressive on the scripted drives, right? Where, he'll take that 3rd and 1 shot to Tyler Conklin in single coverage against Jaron Kearse, right? Or he'll take that deep shot to Justin Jefferson against Trayvon Diggs, and then he won't for the rest of the game. Here in this game, he was willing to take those shots. And also, he was willing to kind of challenge these windows because you have, it's not just that you have good receivers, right? Because sometimes you can have really great receivers that are just not great at particular things, right? So, probably maybe a good example of that might be, I'm trying to think, who are the top receivers in the NFL right now? Like Cooper Kupp might be a good example of somebody who's not the greatest contested catch receiver in the NFL, right? There are some really good receivers that are better at that than him. But he is better at creating space, right? He has a fair amount of agility, a good amount of speed. He has a bunch of other receiver skills that allow him to be one of the league leaders in touchdowns and yards right now, right? Julio Jones, right? Not a great red zone receiver. And that, he's great in everything else, right? And we assume that if you've got the body type, and we assume that if you're a really great receiver, that you're good at the skill that your body type will afford you because you're a good receiver and you're like 6'2", 220 pounds, so you should be good in the red zone. And he's just not, right? Well, if that's the case, is it the case that the Vikings should be more aggressive about, targeting these receivers who we know are good? It's among the best receiving pair in the NFL. And the thing is, they are good contested catch receivers. Now, year to year, contested catch capability is like a little bit shaky. It's a very low frequency event. The talent of the defender plays a big role. And so there's a high degree of variance. But Adam Thielen has consistently been one of the among the league leaders, like certainly in the top 10 and sometimes in the top 5 in winning contested catches and contested catch rate by Pro Football Focus. Justin Jefferson was not great at it necessarily last year in terms of the percentage, but in college he was really fantastic at it. And so you've got a pair of receivers that are really great at contested catches. So why not have them demonstrated against a secondary that's a little bit depleted and in a situation where you need to be a little bit more aggressive because you're playing against, well, what you thought was, heading into the game at least, an aggressive offense. So really good to see Cousins challenge those tight windows, give receivers a chance. And that phrase is always kind of used because like it's about trusting your guys, and sometimes you shouldn't trust your guys. Sometimes your guys are not going to win that matchup, and you shouldn't, like, quote unquote, trust your receivers. So there's like this weird moral component to it, but in this case you should do it because that specific skill set is something that they're quite good at. They were able to kind of bear that out. They were able to say, hey, when you've got this contested situation, especially when they've got some like good members of the secondary. Asante Samuel was back for that game. He was returning from a concussion, and they've got some players that are like fairly good at undercutting routes and stuff like that. But they don't necessarily like win all those contested catches. Like they're good at a lot of things. They don't necessarily win all those contested catches, especially with the way Chris Harris has been playing over the past couple of weeks. And so try it out, win those contested catches, make sure that your receivers have a better access to the ball with your ball placement, but make sure that you can win those throws and convert on third down. And it was nice to see Cousins actually do that this time.
Well, let's talk about the run game, too, because this was something that there were a number of runs and a couple of little screens, too, that were really successful. Dalvin Cook did pretty well, but Madison had a couple of runs himself that looked fantastic.
Yeah, no, it was nice to see. For all of the kind of the problems we've been seeing along this offensive line, and we have been seeing a lot of them, I would not argue, for example, that this offensive line is like run blocking amazingly, right? But before Christian Darrisaw like drew a couple of penalties and gave up a sack, essentially right before I complimented him on Twitter, Darrisaw was doing a great job kind of opening up holes in the run game. There's like at least one occasion where it seemed like he was like blocking multiple people near the goal line. That was nice to see. But yeah, I mean, we saw Alexander Madison do a pretty good job breaking tackles and getting forward. I mean, there were some plays where like they called it and it was just like, that's not really the right play for Madison. I think it was one where he's like running horizontal and he needed to cut up field from like 7 yards deep, and that wasn't really going to work. But otherwise, for the most part, he did a really great job, creating yards after contact and powering through. And he has been like faster, right? Ever since he entered the NFL, it feels like he has slimmed down a little bit and he's gotten a lot faster, and that's kind of worked out for him. But Dalvin Cook, of course, he had a couple of explosive plays. He got the touchdown. I got into like a fight with his agent on Twitter, I guess.
Why did you get into a fight with his agent on Twitter?
This time I didn't initiate it, and I was attempting to defuse it for almost the entire time. So I'm going to put that out there. You take it how you will. But what happened was Cook is averaging at the beginning of the game something like 7 yards a carry, right? And near the goal, like the first shot at scoring from the goal line, they throw a couple of times, they don't convert, right? And so his agent is complaining on Twitter, you're averaging 7 yards a carry. Why not give it to Dalvin Cook? And Will Ragetz didn't quote tweet, he screenshotted it and tweeted out that Dalvin Cook's agent is, mad, right? Which he was like mad last week too, right? And I said, Siri, what is motivated reasoning? Right? Like, it's just a silly joke, but like, obviously the agent is motivated to want, plays called for their player, right? Like that's just true. I also think it is smart to run at the goal line. Like I think one of the things about being kind of this analytics guy is that, you get this reputation of like never wanting to run the ball or whatever, but like at the goal line, running the ball is like a positive expected value play, do it. You should run the ball, especially if you've got a good back like Dalvin Cook. But also knowing that you're apparently running well against the defensive front that happens to be one of the worst, if not the worst, defensive front in the NFL against the run. So, you're probably right that they should have run the ball, but it's just like, whether or not he's right doesn't change the fact that he's kind of motivated to make these statements. So I tweeted that out. And then like 20 minutes later, he just started tweeting at me. Every time Dalvin Cook made a big play, I would get a tweet from him. It was like a flashback to like the Chad Greenway days, honestly. But like but like the difference, of course, is that Dalvin Cook was having a fantastic game, right? like instead of just the one pick six on Chad Greenway's birthday, it was like these runs that broke out for like 20 yards, or Dalvin Cook would score a touchdown from like the 4 or something like that. And I would just get these tweets, and he's like, someone explained to me, this or this, or like, hey, they for the game-winning drive, they're like, he tweeted out like they should put the ball in Dalvin Cook's hands so they can score. They really need to get some explosives at Arif NFL. And I was like, yeah, I agree that it would be like good to score on this drive. Like, what do you want from me, man? Like, all I said was that it's clearly an example of motivated reasoning for an agent to want their player to get more touches. That's all it is. You could be right. It sounds like you were, but like that doesn't change my tweet. And he's like, well, why'd you have to be a dick about it? And I was like, man, I didn't say anything in response to that, right? Like, but I was just like, man, I don't know if I'm the one being a dick about any of this, right? Like
the best thing you can do at this particular moment is just stop replying and hope he gets tired.
Which I did. And then he tweeted at me to text him, right? And like, so I did, right? I was just like, what is going to get resolved over text? Which, no, I'm not gonna go into that. But,
but you're trying to say is that you don't currently have an active beef with the representation of Dalvin Cook.
As far as I know, the beef that erupted during the game was also unbeknownst to me. Someone actually he like tweeted at me and I didn't see it because like my notifications are like a slot machine on game day. So I just didn't see it. So a couple of people DM'd me him tweeting at me and I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. But yeah, I like responded to him like a couple of times. It was just like, look, this is what I mean by motivated reasoning. And also, look, I think you're right. They should score. Like we don't disagree on this one. But yeah, so that happened. But yeah, it only happened because Dalvin Cook had a great game, right? Like he wouldn't have been tweeting at me a bunch if Dalvin Cook had like an awful game. He had a great game. Yeah. There was a lot of kind of good play design for him as well. But I think that, as bad as the Vikings were in terms of the offensive linemen drawing penalties, in terms of the offensive linemen, allowing pressure into the pocket, Cousins was pressured like 54% of the time, something crazy like that. And I posted the win rates previously. The quarterbacks with a 50% or higher pressure rate win a shockingly low number of games. Like it's just, there's like a switch at like 42, 43% or something, which is like an arbitrary endpoint, but about there where quarterback win rates drop really dramatically. So 52, 55% or something crazy like that. But in terms of the run blocking, a lot of it was there, which again, Cook and Madison did a lot to kind of create their own yards as well. But just a really kind of well-executed run game against a front that was kind of begging to be run on just because they're not very good at stopping the run. So kind of a fairly somewhat complete offensive game from the Vikings. It just would have been nice to I think they had like 90 some yards and penalties or something like that. It would have been nice to have like way fewer penalties.
Well, before we talk about the defense, there's a specific play I want to talk about on offense that really summed up the Vikings' approach to the game. And that was the screen to Adam Thielen. That I don't even know if you probably wouldn't even call it a screen. It was just like a direct toss to Adam Thielen.
Oh, like the one-on-one. Yeah, it was used. Yeah, okay.
And Thielen just burns him.
Yeah, that was. And my worry was that would motivate them to throw further screens. And in fairness, they did. But also in fairness, they actually threw screens with blockers. There's one where also there was a screen to Dalvin Cook. Just to go off topic for a second, there's a screen to Dalvin Cook where they had like 2 or 3 blockers in front of him. and they got they got the first down, right? They got like 8 yards or something like that, and not a single block was made, and Cook was just tackled. It was like weird in that it was successful, but also frustrating. But no, like Adam Thielen got the ball. It's like a quick, it's a now throw, I think is what they call them. Where he doesn't even like set up like for a smoke, right? Because a lot of times on wide receiver smoke screens, they'll take a step forward and then jab back to catch it, so they can kind of keep that cushion. Because then the defensive back takes a step back, and their step back is more dramatic in terms of the effect it has on a play than a receiver's fake step forward. He doesn't even do that. He just turns, he catches the ball, and he runs up, and he just has a good angle. And you're right, he just burns him. And I think it's a first down, right? Like it was just like kind of wild that Thielen got the ball like -3 yards from the line of scrimmage, and he ends up getting a first down.
The defender moved back. The defender was just like, there's no way that they're going to toss a quick pass to Adam Thielen here. He's 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and he's going to come at me. Oh, right, exactly. Now I have to make the play. Oh, well, there he goes.
Open field tackles. I'm not really a tackling kind of guy. I don't know about this.
Yeah, this is I'm the number 2 corner. Like,
oh no,
exactly. You're Adam Thielen. Well, let's talk about the defensive side of the ball, and specifically Eric Kendricks, who, despite PFF having a terrible rating for this game, seemed to be everywhere.
Yeah, he was always around the ball. I am going to... because PFF gave him a bad grade in this game and a bad grade in the last game, right? And there's nothing particular about Eric Kendricks' style of play that leads to negative PFF grades despite, playing well, right? Like, you might be able to make the argument that could be the case for Anthony Barr. You can't really make that argument for Eric Kendricks because he has been like the top 2 linebacker for PFF, I think, in the 2 prior seasons to this, right? It was like him and Demario Davis. Like, they love him in terms of grades. And so I'm really curious. I'm going to probably investigate it a little bit deeper as to kind of maybe why that's the case. Obviously, Mike Zimmer, today, or we're recording this on Monday, so today he talks to the media, and one of the first things he mentions is how pleased he was with Eric Kendricks, right? And thankfully, no one brought up Eric Kendricks' PFF grade, and we had to be subject to another rant. Zimmer liked how Eric Kendricks played. How could you not, honestly? That incredible interception, the sack. I think the very first blitz the Vikings had in that game was Eric Kendricks' sack. It was like first quarter, 11 minutes. And it seemed like he was playing lights out. I'm going to try and figure that out, the grade thing, and see kind of like what mistack. Like there was a moment where he got toasted by Keenan Allen on an out and up. I think it was just an out, but Keenan Allen was able to make him miss and then move up and get the first down. And, it's a linebacker on a receiver. If I'm going to give Anthony Barr an excuse, I should give Eric Kendricks an excuse, and I do. And you'll end up with a negative grade on that play, even though that's kind of not what you need from them. But then, of course, he has an interception on Keenan Allen running the route for him. And it's nuts because the range that Kendricks has to demonstrate at an interception, I think, like the broadcast didn't really do it justice. The All 22, which I think Syed Schemes tweeted out, where there's been a lot of talk about robot technique, which has been in kind of the football deep Twitter sphere for a little bit, ever since Micah Parsons, quote unquote, looked lost against Tom Brady, but actually was executing his technique really well. But part of it is that you have to spin around and look kind of awkward for a second as you're picking up a deep crosser on like play action or something like that. That's exactly what Eric Kendricks did. And he was able to kind of follow what Keenan Allen's route would be. Zimmer mentioned something that I recall from Eric Kendricks' like scouting report way back when he was coming out in college in 2015, coming out into the draft. And it was, Zimmer mentioned that Eric Kendricks has a really good feel for when receivers are running in the zones behind him and where they are. And that's something that you noticed even at UCLA, is that he would have such a great understanding of what route concepts that the opposing team was going to run, or that they've run, that he knew based off of what he saw, what routes that he saw were being run. He knew what routes he didn't see were being run, right? Like if you see a picture of like a cat, but your a piece of paper is blocking out half of it, you know what's on the other side of that piece of paper, right? Like you don't need to be able to see it to know that it's a cat. Kind of the same way, he sees a bunch of these routes, play out, and the stuff that he can't see, he's filling in based off of, his film study. And so he floats to kind of the right places when he's in zone coverage to kind of feel where he needs to be. It's one of the, I think, one of the more underrated capabilities of a coverage linebacker. It's something that like Fred Warner does really well, for example. And I think that we saw that a little bit with the Keenan Allen throw, but we saw it, I think, just in general a lot over the past year or so. And Zimmer bringing that up just kind of tells you that like the Vikings rely on that a lot because Kendricks is covering a lot of ground over the middle of the field, especially when the Vikings are running these coverages where they have to kind of protect their corners on the outside and they kind of move their safeties to do some of that outside stuff. Well, anytime you move a player on defense, there's going to be a hole you have to fill, and the Vikings are kind of relying on Eric Kendricks to do a lot of that hole filling. And so far, I think he's done a really great job. Again, I'm like really curious about this PFF grade stuff, so I'll take a deeper look at it. It sounds like a lot of it's occurring in the run game, and that was kind of the knock against him early in his career, that he was a little bit undersized compared to some of the linebackers coming out. And that was a class that had like Bernard McKinney in it and stuff like that, like really big linebackers. And Kendricks would get like swallowed up by guards, which you saw a little bit at UCLA. But he improved at that like really dramatically over the past couple of years. And so I want to see if, he's getting pushed back by opposing guards, or if he's, if PFF is saying that he's like missing his run fits or his gap assignments or whatever. And maybe he's not, maybe he is, and maybe PFF is just kind of reading it one way when it's in fact another way. I don't know, but that's kind of worth taking a second look at.
Well, let's talk about the defense here, because it wasn't just Eric Kendricks who was out there and playing well. Despite the fact that the team was getting burned with 2 minutes left in the second quarter, the defense held together fairly well.
Yeah, they I think like that like drive is the reason that their third down percentage isn't amazing. I think it's like they allowed a 42% third down rate or something like that. But otherwise, they did a really good job. They prevented the Chargers from getting to the red zone all that often. I mean, once the Chargers got there, they were able to usually execute. But the Chargers only got like 4.6 yards per play, and they were able to force a couple of punts. I think like 5 Chargers punts, versus the Vikings only having to punt 3 times. And also obviously they had that interception. So, on all of that, I think a lot of that just has to do with, first of all, I think that this is another example of Zimmer putting together a really fantastic game plan. We saw that, against the Saints in the playoffs, right? A really phenomenal game plan, one of the best defensive game plans we've seen from Zimmer in a while. But I think that this could be potentially up there. It's just a regular season game, so people aren't going to talk about it all that much. But, consider the fact that the Vikings have never, I think Ben Gessing on Twitter pointed this out, have never been able to put together kind of the 4 centerpieces of their defense together on the field at the same time. So that's like Michael Pierce, Anthony Barr, Daniil Hunter, Patrick Peterson, right? And obviously there's Harrison Smith as well. So those 5 have not played in the same game this year. And I think will not, right? Unless there's like maybe, I don't know. But like Daniil Hunter's out for the year, right? So like that's going to be it. So consider they're missing Daniil Hunter, they're missing Patrick Peterson, they're missing Harrison Smith, right? They're missing Michael Pierce, and the 5th one, whoever that is. But they're missing a number of players that they want to have on defense to really make that defense run, and they were able to still force Herbert to throw. I mean, he's a famously fairly aggressive quarterback. This year he's been a lot less aggressive. I mean, his average depth of target is a lot shorter this year than it was last year. But he did not. He threw deep like 3 times, I think, against the blitz this year, or 5 times against the blitz this year. And I think the Vikings saw that, like, of all the times he's been blitzed, and decided to blitz him more than I think they've blitzed any other quarterback in the NFL this year. So they blitzed at like a clip of like 40% or something like that. And even though they weren't always getting pressure on those blitzes, they were kind of speeding up Herbert's process. So they got those sacks, right? They got the Cameron Bynum sack, they got the Eric Kendricks sack. But they also were able to just kind of force Herbert to just throw it short as a matter of course. and not allow those deep developing routes to play. And that's good because the Vikings don't really have the capability of defending deep, right? Like Mackenzie Alexander's a 4-5 corner. Bashad Breeland is Bashad Breeland. We see him get beat like every week. Chris Boyd is who he is, and Cameron Dantzler it seems to be a lot slower this year. So they don't really have the ability to contest deep, especially without Harrison Smith. They have to rely on Xavier Woods a little bit. They have to rely on Cameron Bynum a little bit. And so the only way that they can really prevent the Chargers from taking the deep shots that Mike Williams is so good at is to force Herbert to throw quickly. And even though they're not always getting pressure, I think they had a somewhat low pressure rate in this game, actually. They were able to force a kind of a faster internal clock. And even when, he's throwing deep on some of these blitzes, he's doing it with a little bit less accuracy than we're used to seeing from him. And so a really, I think, great game plan for dealing with Herbert and making sure that the Vikings didn't have receivers running behind him on those deep shots. And also, obviously, they stopped up really well in the run game. I mean, this is a Chargers offensive line that, we talked to our guest about how dramatically it's changed over the past 2 years. I mean, they've always invested in the offensive line. The investments never worked out. Suddenly, the investments are working out for them, right? Like the free agents that they signed, the rookie that they drafted, I guess 2 rookies that they drafted. That's been working out for them. And regardless of that, the Vikings were still able to hold up in the run game despite not having Michael Pierce. Dalvin Tomlinson had a pretty good game stopping the run, or rather kind of moving bodies to make the run easier to stop, I should say. And Everson Griffin played well against the run. It's just kind of, they had a somewhat complete day despite not having like that kind of complete team. And I say somewhat complete, obviously, because again, those like 2-minute drives.
Those 2-minute drives are killer. But it's worth mentioning, it seemed like the Chargers were off. And I don't know if it's necessarily like a Vikings disrupted their timing issue, if this was just a series of bad passing decisions by Justin Herbert, or if this was a series of just unlucky drops by his receivers. But man, it looked like the Chargers were really disrupted out there.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. We saw that with Lamar Jackson too, right? That Lamar was off. Obviously, the fourth quarter didn't matter. He was able to kind of put it all together and be lights out again. But in this game, Herbert was off. He wasn't as accurate as we're used to seeing. He threw fewer than 3. I think he only had 2 deep passes in the game. I don't remember anymore. But he wasn't kind of willing to unleash it, which, I mean, he's got one of the stronger arms in the NFL, especially among the younger players. And so I think he might not have thrown deep at all, actually. And so because of that, they kind of eliminate some of the advantages they have in their offensive setup. He's a little bit less accurate because he's throwing either off platform or off rhythm, or he's not trusting what he's seeing. Maybe the Vikings are kind of moving around all these players in front of him and creating uncertainty for him. Whatever it is, the Vikings did a pretty good job making sure, and maybe they just got lucky, right, that Herbert was having an off day. But from the perspective of somebody who's writing about the Vikings, it very much seems like the Vikings did a good job making sure that Herbert couldn't really play within what he was seeing, right? Play the kind of football that he's been comfortable with, that's allowed him to kind of be one of the more promising young football players in the NFL. I don't really think it was an issue of kind of the routes that they were running or anything like that. Certainly, I think that the Vikings played a really big role, despite not getting a ton of pressure up front, making Herbert feel like that there was pressure, or making Herbert feel like he couldn't trust the clock in his head or his feel in the pocket. One of the more, I think, kind of fascinating outcomes to the game was that the Vikings were able to make sure that Herbert wasn't comfortable.
It was just kind of from the standpoint of somebody who doesn't get to see the Chargers very often because of reasons. Chargers don't do a lot of national games, or haven't done a lot of national games this year, and CBS usually ends up being their network, and they usually end up showing the more popular game of the week. You don't see a lot of Justin Herbert in the Midwest, and so you're okay. Well, I want to see him in action. I want to see the guy who got Rookie of the Year last year. See if he's actually worth it. And boy, he did not look like he was enjoying himself out there. He had a couple of decent runs, but
yeah, and that seemed to be kind of along the lines of his most effective play. Yeah.
It's like, well, because it didn't involve anyone else. Like,
yeah, right.
Like, I can't throw this ball because it's not going to get, caught. And apparently our timing is all messed up. So what are we going to do here? And as far as being able to stop the run outside of the 2-minute drill, the Vikings were fairly successful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I think a lot of it was just they saw a young quarterback and they kind of knew. Something interesting, Zimmer mentioned that the Chargers, that their offensive coordinator, they said that they've played him before, which I think is like Kevin O'Connell or something like that. Or that's the Rams offensive coordinator. But they said, that they're fairly familiar with the way the Chargers run their offense, right? And Joe Lombardi, so it's the former Saints quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator. So they said that the Chargers hadn't put together that many different protection calls that year, and so they knew that they could exploit that. And so I think that part of the game plan was that it would make it really difficult for. I mean, I'm guessing it's the center that's doing most of the protection calls, and they've got an experienced center, former Green Bay center, a veteran that should be able to call it. But if you don't have a lot of protections in your arsenal, or if Herbert is the one calling the protections, and he just doesn't have a large menu to choose from, the Vikings kind of forcing these like rough decisions. Like I think on the Kendricks blitz, I think it was a delayed blitz first of all, but they had like it's a play action play. And the Vikings had like 9 in the box or something like that. And it's like, well, okay, you're only protecting with like 6, maybe 7 if you count the running back who's, the play action guy. And you've got 9 in the box, you need kind of a way to account for that. And the way the Vikings ran that blitz, it's such a basic, when you draw it up, it looks so basic. It doesn't look like a complex blitz at all. But they did a really good job of kind of moving some of these players around so that 2 of those defenders had no one to block. And so the Vikings only rushed, I think, 5 on that play, the 4 defensive linemen and then Kendricks. But Kendricks goes in unblocked, and that's because 2 of those guards had no one to block. One guard is down blocking on a defensive end, one tight end is blocking DJ Wanham, and one guard, because it's play action, they have to simulate a run action, so it's a zone movement. So there's a limited number of protections that you can call. So Kendricks just kind of zooms up this gap. And he sees and he could have just made a decision, right? It might not have been a called blitz. But he just sees an opening and it's like a 15-yard sack or something like that. Obviously, the protection is in tandem with the receiver's ability to get open. And the only way a quarterback takes a 15-yard sack is if he doesn't see anybody open. That's the only scenario where that happens, right? Even some of the worst quarterbacks, the quarterbacks most likely to invite pressure. If you're 15 yards back, you're looking for a receiver and you can't find one. And so that played a big role, but I think Herbert, because it's play action, is only looking at half the field, right? A lot of young quarterbacks will only take stock of half the field on play action, especially on these zone boots where most receivers are only running to one side of the field. And so if you just kind of flow coverage in that direction, it's really tough for a quarterback to kind of pick apart everybody that they need to see. And so stuff like that made it kind of a lot easier for the Vikings to make Herbert functionally just ineffective.
Well, let's wrap this up with a couple of odds and ends. Obviously, Udo is just he's a machine in the sense that he is a penalty machine. This is not going well for him this season.
No, and it sucks because if he was at least playing well on top of it, you would kind of forgive it a little bit. Like a good example is a player with the exact same number of penalties and nearly the exact same number of penalty yards given up is Trevon Diggs, right? Cornerback for Dallas. No one is upset at him about that, right? Obviously it'd be better if he cleaned it up, right? But no one's upset at him, right? They're just if we have to live with that for the rest of your career, but you keep producing, who is that, 8 interceptions right now? If you keep producing that for the rest of your career, we're fine. It's fine. Oli Udo is not doing that. He is committing penalties because he has no idea what he needs to be doing. And it's very frustrating because those first 3 games, one of which included a number of, I think, 2 penalties from him in the Bengals game. But in those first 3 games, like he looked like a fairly good, not even just competent, but like a fairly good guard. And now he's just completely lost. And I don't know if it's like a confidence thing, or it looks like he's shot and he can't go back to his previous form, or if opponents kind of studying him have kind of figured out the best ways to beat him. If you count, so right now in terms of total penalties, he's tied for third with Trayvon Diggs, right, with 8. And then the 2 players with more penalties than him are Connor Williams and Alex Leatherwood. But if you count declined and offsetting penalties, so if you look at the total number of flags that they've induced, Oli Udoh moves up to second. So it's only Connor Williams ahead of him. And the majority of their penalties are comprised of offensive holding calls, which, like, obviously, like, that makes sense, right? If you're struggling, one of the things that you do is you hold on a little bit longer, even when it doesn't matter. Like, I think one of the holding penalties that he drew in this game was on a running play where the running back had already kind of run past him, right? And so, but he keeps holding, and slow motion makes things look a lot more intentional, a lot more exaggerated, and a lot worse. Like, you could be holding for half a second longer than you need to, but slow motion, even though it's slow motion makes it feel like they're holding on a lot longer, and your brain is not adjusting for slow motion enough to really, account for that. Even I think once you deal with that, the amount of penalties that he generated that were just unnecessary and took back like some genuinely good plays, it's frustrating, man. Who's the last? I think was it Ron Yeri had a ton of penalties, but you lived with it because he didn't allow sacks. You just kind of wish that you're getting something out of it, and you're not. And we've got some mailbag questions about kind of what to do about that. So yeah, I'll answer them when I get there. But yeah, it's rough. And Ezra Cleveland, at least, he's not playing lights out. And I think he gave up the sack in this game. Kirk Cousins got sacked once, I think, and I think it was an Ezra Cleveland play.
Was that the sack fumble?
Oh, with the Joey Bosa. Yeah, it might have been something along those lines, right? And he either gave up the sack or he gave up the pressure that led to the sack. Either way, he had some pretty bad reps in this game. But I think for the most part, you look at Ezra Cleveland's play and you say, I can take it for a second-year player. The level of play that he has, he's got some of these pretty bad plays that stick in your mind, and as an offensive lineman you mostly just remember the bad plays. But I think for the most part, you can kind of live with it as he's kind of adjusting to it, and it's not alarming. But with Oli Udoh, it's not there, man. And yeah, he's gunning for the penalty record, I guess. I don't know what the record is, but he's gunning for it.
I guess the last thing I want to mention about the game itself involved the fake that the refs called, that the refs stopped, and it, just as a fan, not as an analyst or anything like that, it seemed wrong that the play was stopped. And I don't know if the NFL has put out anything about it, but it seemed like the referee was in fact in the right spot to start.
Yeah. So there's 2 things about that. One is that the referee that you look at, because you don't want to look at all 8 referees to see if they're ready. So there's one referee that's kind of responsible for that. And he gives the ready signal that you can snap the ball. And he did that. That's the thing that confuses me the most, and I think would tick me off the most as a fan. It's just you see the referee's got his hand up, and then he brings his hand down, and that's the ready signal. And they don't snap the ball until after that. And it should if that's the system that's in place, it should not be on the players to know that the umpire behind them is not completely set. It should be entirely on that ref. And so it's weird that would be penalized, right? Zimmer didn't really seem to complain about the call after the game. Maybe not. He didn't seem like he was complaining about that call. So I could just be missing something, and maybe it's customary to have a beat between when the hand goes down and when you snap. I think that could be the case, right? But it is odd to me to have watched that. And the umpire did seem like they were in the right place. And yeah, our opinions influenced by the broadcasters who also thought the umpire was basically in the right spot. But he's behind. It's just, I don't know. that sucks, right? And I'm glad it didn't become relevant because the Vikings ended up winning. But like, a fake punt, man. Just like let it let it happen. Give Kenny Wong his chances.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the mailbag. And the first question is going to be from Big Tony, who's referencing our episode title today. He goes, "What episode number will it be? Or will it be that says the Vikings win the Super Bowl?" I'm betting 5,267.
I appreciate the optimism of choosing an episode number that coincides with a date that could conceivably be on a calendar, but I feel like there's a non-zero chance that we'll include the phrase "the Vikings win Super Bowl" in an episode title for an episode unrelated to them winning the NFL championship, like something along the lines of like the Vikings win the Super Bowl of blank, right? Like it's like the Josh Freeman game could have very easily been the Vikings win the Super Bowl of suck, right? Like it could have just been that, right?
Yeah,
so
like those words in order could happen after a draft episode.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or like the Vikings win the offseason Super Bowl if they have like a really good free agency. Like there's all kinds of opportunities there. So I think that if I were going to take the over under, I would definitely take the under in 5,267. Even though this isn't like a case where I am expecting the Vikings to win anything anytime soon.
No, it's just using the actual title. And as the person in control of that, I will say that it'll be closer to 650, I would imagine. Jeremy McGee asks, has Mason Cole really been good enough to replace Bradbury? Is there potentially a good offensive line that can be configured from this year's roster?
Maybe. I think that it's tough, right? Because the way that Bradbury's been kind of like really useful for the way the offense runs is that, he calls all the protections. There are some problems with the Vikings being able to get all of their protections in order against the Ravens, although like that's like kind of a Ravens thing too. And so if Mason Cole is like not as capable, like Kirk mentioned that he was like just as comfortable, right, with Mason Cole calling the protections, but Kirk takes a very kind of hands-off approach to the way that protections are called along the offensive line. I think that is kind of one area that we need to kind of think about before we say, hey, Mason Cole should probably replace Bradbury. That said, Cole has played fairly well. That's kind of another area where I want to do a little bit more of a deep dive, where I kind of watch just all of his snaps and kind of compare him to Bradbury. It very much seems like he's doing a better job than Bradbury, and I think that like the easiest way to see that is that we're not like complaining about him after a game, which I think that happened often enough with Bradbury under center or at the center position where, that was kind of the biggest problem. So I think that I don't know that you can create a good offensive line from the roster's current pieces. Maybe if like Wyatt Davis continues to develop, maybe by the end of the year, that's something within the realm of possibility. But I think for right now, there's going to be kind of like some weaknesses, right? Where the Vikings are just not going to be able to maintain like a solid 5 across the board.
Jeremy McGee also asks, what do we make of Bynum for the rest of the year? Seems unlikely he'll see much playing time unless there's a major scheme change.
I mean, there could be. I mean, the Vikings have put multiple like additional safeties on the field before. They've talked about putting 3 safeties on the field. We just saw a team do that against the Vikings with the Chargers, and we've seen the Ravens do it all the time. That there's ways that you can put multiple safeties on the field and run an effective defense. So I think that the Vikings will probably, once Harrison Smith comes back, try to find ways to put Bynum on the field. When they put him like in man coverage as a cornerback in training camp, it wasn't really working out for him. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to be the solution, but it could be along the lines of the way the Ravens do it, where I think Stevens is somebody that, I think it's Brandon Stevens, somebody that also maintains that kind of slot capabilities as well as playing as a safety. It changes kind of the ways that you run cover 3, obviously, because you've got 3 safeties. It changes what you do in the box. So I think that's something that they'll consider, but I don't think there's going to be kind of a major schematic change. But I do think that they do want to put Bynum out on the field once Harrison Smith comes back, which should be soon.
Next question is going to be from Daniel, who asks, it feels like Udo has like 8 penalties a game now. At what point will it take the Vikings to take a different look at right guard? Maybe even slide Mason Cole over or try out Wyatt Davis?
the fact that Wyatt Davis has like not been active in games where the Vikings have like a reasonably healthy offensive line is fairly concerning to me in terms of like his development and whether or not he's got the ability to kind of just go out there and play. He was active, obviously, against the Chargers because the Vikings like missed multiple people as a result of COVID restrictions. But he only took special team snaps. But I don't know that Wyatt Davis is kind of at the moment a potential solution. Like he could be again later down the line. But not at the moment. As for Mason Cole at guard, I actually kind of like that idea that maybe that they should try and slide Mason Cole over once Garrett Bradbury comes back and kind of see what they have. They would probably get a little bit more movement, even though, Udo is a fairly, for his size, a fairly athletic guy, especially at guard. You're not going to see guys at his size move as well as he does very often. I still think you're going to get more movement capability out of having Mason Cole there. So I think that that's something that they should try. And think about, like, I don't know if that's like Mason Cole just doesn't have enough strength to handle playing the guard position, but I think that that's something that you should do because even he did play guard at Michigan, right? Like it's not completely outside of his skill set. You never know if you don't go.
Bishop Sycamore alumnus asks, when does the Draw Play Dave Patreon sponsored by Norse Code start? And any way the merchandising could include an Arif turkey plushie, to haunt everyone's Thanksgiving table. For those of you who didn't see it, to punish Arif's sass mouth, the fantastic Draw Play Dave went out and made Arif into a turkey. And there has been a discussion with him as to whether or not we could potentially put that on a shirt next year, because it's the fact that it's Thanksgiving, like next week-ish, like the shirts wouldn't come in if you ordered it. So at the moment, we're not doing anything this year with it, but we could potentially for next year. But it really was a fun image, and to which Arif immediately said, "Monetize this."
My brain's broken in some very particular ways at this point.
Yes. Also, plushies are ridiculously expensive for small runs of things, so that
wild expensive. Yeah,
that's probably that's probably not possible. But he does ask the same type of question as somebody else here. He goes, per PFF, Eric Kendricks bad at run fits? ? Also, Devil Flanders asks, PFF gave Kendricks the worst grade out of all the defensive players this week. Should we finally cut him?
just let him go. No, that's interesting. The Vikings obviously value him a lot, and he's done enough that I think you probably don't have to worry about it too much. But that's definitely worth investigation. Like, why is it that PFF gave him two pretty, like, not just bad grades, but like abysmally bad grades 2 games in a row?
I thought you were about to say it's worth investigating cutting him. I was like, well, we're going in that direction. We're going that direction.
Just like full speed ahead. Yeah.
And tanking hard. Christian asks, what is this team? Why do they go from shooting themselves in the foot with great enthusiasm one week to being super aggressive this week? This is like online bullying, isn't it?
They're negging us, is what they're doing. No, I don't like. I feel like that's not completely out of our expectations that the Vikings would just do random stuff and succeed when we kind of give up on them and fail when we're fairly bought in. That's just kind of normal. And the fact that the Vikings finally do something that everyone wants them to do. One thing I want to add, though, like really kind of important, is that I think everyone thinks that Zimmer wants these short passes. And I think some people, not like everybody, but like some people were surprised when Zimmer said something like, I don't want Cousins throwing 5 yards in 2nd and 18, right? And that wasn't surprising to me at all. Zimmer's always been an advocate of like a run-oriented offense that has explosive passes. Like he's very much liked the way Stefanski and Gary Kubiak ran the offense when it had a bunch of play-action shots, when it had a run-focused kind of early game and stuff like that. And so when you throw the ball, he wants it to be kind of like a big play. And so he likes big play offenses. And I think people just, because he's a defensive head coach, don't think that that's what he wants out of an offense. That's absolutely what he wants. And so they were aggressive in a way that kind of fits what the Vikings want, what they've been for most of Zimmer's tenure. So that's not like that surprising. The Vikings just kind of being volatile is just that is what the team is, right? Like, what is this team? They're a mystery. That's the whole point of like the Vikings, right? Like, is that they defy your ability to read into them. They're like a mystery. They're inscrutable. That's who they are.
I will say that even though it was the 2-minute warning, even though the Chargers had no timeouts, I figured that if one team was going to be able to screw this up, screw up the kneel downs, it would be the Vikings. Well, also the Lions, but definitely the Vikings.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, for sure. Someone asked me, I don't know if he was even on this podcast, like, how are the Vikings going to screw this? No, it wasn't on the podcast. It was during the game because the Vikings had a 7-point lead. They had the ball. How are they going to screw it up? And I was like, oh, they could very easily be the only team in history to fumble the victory formation for a return score, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like, all things are possible through Ben DiNucci. Let's just be clear about that. Chris asks, did the Vikings just not Viking enough to lose? Or did the Chargers simply Charger harder than them? Also, which other NFL franchises have become verbs at this point?
Falcons.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they all represent extremely similar concepts, which is very frustrating. Lions lioning, that's a thing, but that's not snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. That's just being incompetent. Jets, very similar. Jetsing. The Seahawks are kind of unique, but I don't think that they've verbed themselves, right? So we're not there. So are the Patriots. They haven't verbed themselves. They're kind of unique. Plus, it's just like kind of boring to describe, like in a team that for most of people's memory of them have like won in overwhelming and inevitable ways. Like that's just kind of like you get used to it, and so it's difficult to have a verb for like stepping on someone's throat that like feels unique about the team. So that for I think NFL franchises, that covers a good chunk of them. Like I don't think. Like, if you ask fans of a franchise, they'd be like, oh, the Giants are doing Giant stuff again. But I think for the NFL at large, I don't know what that would mean, right? Like, it's just like
Raiders Raidering, like, maybe, but it doesn't roll off the tongue as easily.
Yeah, and that's part of it, too. Like, I think Vikings Vikinging, or whatever it is, that is already difficult in terms of, like, creating a verb off of. Like, Chargers Chargering? Oh, easy. That's perfect verb form. But for the Vikings, that one's a little bit more tough. The Falcons, they also have that S in there that makes it tough, but you can just say falconing. So you don't have like that to deal with as much. I remember Clemson used to Clemson all the time, until they started winning. But like, that's a thing. But I don't know. Yeah, I can't think of any other NFL franchises like off the top of my head that get that. So it's like I think I named like 5 that kind of fit. So that's probably it.
Ben asks, like it or love it, Jefferson tossing the ball to Keenan Allen sitting on the bench. Bonus, how did we escape that awesomeness without one of those ridiculous taunting penalties?
He's a rock star. I don't know.
It happened just far enough away from the field with like players like blocking the ref's view of it that they didn't call it. Like, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah. I mean, that ruled. I love it. More of it, please. The fact that he went on Twitter and was like, this wasn't taunting, it's just game recognizing game. And it's like, it's taunting.
In reality.
Yeah, right. Like, okay, man. I don't want you to get fined for taunting. I don't want anyone to get fined for taunting. But like, yeah, it's taunting. Probably don't like put attention on it. Kind of weird for you to quote tweet it and say, it's like very like the Streisand effect, right?
Yes.
It's Streisanding, right? Like, don't point it out, man. Like, just leave it. But yeah, I love it. I want to see way more of it. I want everybody to do it all the time. But yeah, I'm shocked that this does not result in a taunting penalty.
Andrew Shad asks, what do the analytics say about those quick throws to Thielen against soft coverage? Does it make sense to take those 5 free yards whenever they give them to you? Or is the purpose more to set up other plays?
Well, I mean, there is an element of setting up other plays, but it really kind of depends on the down and distance, right? Like at 3rd and 1, yeah, you'll take the 5 free yards no matter what. That's good play design. 1st and 10, yeah, you'll probably take the 5 free yards or whatever. So that's not too bad. So like if they give you off coverage and you've got somebody that's really good at generating some yards after the catch, or really good at getting out of the release and being on time and creating a passing window with your body. Yeah, I mean that's something that you want to do on a lot of downs, but like 2nd and 18, don't do it, right? Those short, like from an analytical perspective, quarterbacks are not risk. What's the opposite of averse? They don't love risk enough. They're way too risk averse, I should say, in that they tend to only throw deep when it is a little bit more obvious that that's a good play. And so yards per attempt on deep throws is way higher than yards per attempt on short throws, even when you exclude some of these designed short throws that are like screens and stuff like that. And so analytically speaking, short throws are worse than deep throws because we haven't reached an equilibrium where the average result of a deep throw is just as good as the average result of a short throw. And so quarterbacks should, in theory, take a little bit more risk on those deep throws because they average something like 8 to 15 yards in attempt on deep throws. So yeah, analytically, it's not great for 5 yards, but of course, it always kind of depends on the coverage you see, the down and distance, like versus soft coverage. You don't want those deep throws. It's more likely to result in a pick. So maybe you take the short throws and, 5 yards in 1st and 10 isn't bad. So yeah. And then the element of setting up other plays is that if you force them to keep on having to tackle instead of having to create an incompletion or a pick six opportunity or something like that, they'll start moving their defenders up and trying to press, and pressing someone like Adam Thielen is always difficult. And so that will create deep opportunities later when they win off of the release and get off the line of scrimmage and get deep. And so there is an element of setting up other plays where you'll take a negative expected points play in the short term, which is kind of the argument for running the ball, in order to set up these positive expected point plays later.
Michael Lacoste asks, which Vikings player is most likely to have his 3rd grade goldfish stolen by Mark Sanchez? There was some colorful alliteration out there, including his analogy about there's like second in a Walmart parking lot or something like that.
Yeah, right. There's this. I want to see more of that. That was funny. Yeah. But the 3rd grade goldfish thing, I thought that was like you flushed them down the toilet, like he was talking about.
Yes.
Losing, yeah. So I don't think it was stolen. It was that your goldfish died and you had to flush them down the toilet.
But the answer obviously is CJ Ham, who Mark Sanchez has more of an affinity for than even I do.
Yeah. He's got. I didn't know that Mark Sanchez, like when he first started playing football, was a fullback. That's hilarious.
Yeah, he's like game recognizes game on that. I was like,
The other announcer was like, yeah, you love this dude. I don't really get it. And he's like, no, I love fullbacks, but I especially love Ham.
You know what's great is that the Vikings are 2-0 in games that Sanchez has been the announcer on. I'm just throwing that out there. Sean asks, is Clint Kubiak on Twitter? And if so, is this game proof that online bullying works?
Some coaches are on Twitter with burner accounts, right? Clint Kubiak is young enough that you could reasonably think of him as being like tech savvy enough to do it. Not that it takes a ton of tech savviness. I mean, we've seen 50-year-olds with burner accounts, right? But we know Zimmer doesn't have a burner account. But because he gets all of his information relayed secondhand if there is a thing on Twitter. And so it's like very like sometimes things get muddled. It's clear he doesn't have a burner, right? I don't think that Kubiak has a Twitter account, but I'm very open. Like this is like a 51% sure thing. I'm very open to the idea that he has a burner account. And if he does, I think it's more to kind of check in on clippings and stuff like that. And I think it's less that he will get successfully bullied into throwing deep or whatever, and in this game there were actually a lot more deep opportunities than, like, we were praising Kirk for, there were actually a lot of opportunities that Kirk didn't take that he should have taken, with Adam Thielen in particular, on some deeper shots. So I think that Kubiak is actually designing an offense that's a lot more aggressive than the type of feedback that let's say that he's getting right from Twitter. So there's that. So I don't know that it's like in online bullying is a working thing, right? It's just I think it's just that Kirk is like finally hitting the ground running in terms of like the way that the offense is supposed to work.
I like how you're just trying as best as you can to not endorse online bullying as much as you can.
It would be irresponsible of me to endorse the activity that I enjoy the most.
Yes, that is incredibly accurate. We're going to go to Kenneth Allen, who is referring to the abysmal Detroit-Pittsburgh game. So
that game sucked.
It's like, why does everyone hate ties so much? Personally, I am usually on Team Chaos when I don't have a rooting interest in the game, and nothing is more chaotic than a tie. Does this make me crazy, or at least any more crazy than being a Vikings fan generally makes me?
I hate ties. Which is not to say that there shouldn't be NFL ties. Like, I think this game is super brutal, right? And there's only so many people on. I mean, you could change the number of people on a roster, but until you do that, and like the number of people on a roster is not going to change the quality. Like, if you have to dip into your depth like late in the game, that sucks too. So I don't think there should be like infinite overtimes or anything like that, unless it's like NCAA rules where it's like one drive is one overtime. So it's not really like the same in terms of the impact on the body. So there should be a system that allows ties. Obviously, except for like the postseason where you need to have a winner. But I still hate them. Like, Team Chaos is like fine, right? But the way that a tie creates chaos is not like within the game, but it's within the standings. And I do like the way that like stuff goes like akimbo, right? When like standings are thrown off and you've got to calculate all these ties. But like watching a tie is so unsatisfying. As a neutral, it's significantly less unsatisfying, but it very often occurs in games where like things are moving at the pace of molasses, and now you're watching more of it. And because we don't have in our brains the ability to like stop watching something once it starts sucking, we feel forced to watch the rest of this dumb game. And it's the Lions steal. Like, they suck. Like, they're not scoring. And the way the scoring rules are set up is that you can only have ties really if teams struggle. You can't really have ties if both teams are great and are just doing these shootouts, right? Because at some point you've got a sudden death scenario and the next team that scores wins. And so it's not a case of teams going back and forth and creating this compelling game. It's the case of teams not finding a way to score. And so that's like very frustrating too. Like, there's like a very like blue ball kind of portion of it too. So I think that no, ties suck. And the way that the NFL is organized is that ties really only happen in games that suck anyway. And so you're getting more of a game that sucks.
Well, it's hard to argue with that type of logic, especially considering that's exactly why ties happen in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, the struggle here is real. So what we're going to do for the rest of this episode, this is episode 400, technically like 418, but this is technically episode 400. So we're going to kind of take it easy for the rest of the mailbag. It's pretty much non-football related from here on out. And we are inviting back on our original host of Norse Code. Please give it up for Dusty O'Connell. Dusty, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Before we go any further, I do want to make clear that I'm about to be the victim of extensive online bullying. I won't be able to explain it to anyone. Like, it won't make sense to any of you. And if you want to figure out what the joke that these awful people are playing on me is, you're just going to have to become a Patreon subscriber, patreon.com/Norse Code, at least as long as the Christmas episode.
That's so thin. That's so difficult. Like, I'm being bullied, but I can't explain how or why. You just have to believe me. That's ridiculous. Well, we beg to differ, I think is.
Or pay about $3.50 for a month. And keep in mind, I'm not getting any of that money. So I don't know
why. Well, you're just aware that all that glitters is gold. So that's all that matters here. So I get it.
He just wants people to get the show. He wants us to get paid. It's normal.
Yeah. Well, let's go to a question for Dusty from Kenneth Allen, who asks, for Dusty, what is the thematically best drink to watch? Or what's the best drink to watch this absurd Viking season?
Yeah, well, Dusty, you know what the question is. Figure it out.
Yeah.
If I was going to have a drink, I would probably drink it and not watch it, especially given this absurd Viking season.
Okay. What's the cocktail that you would watch the Viking season with?
Rusty Nail, obviously.
So let's explain what the Rusty Nail is exactly.
You're the worst bartender. What is a Rusty Nail, Dusty?
Do you know what a conversation is?
No. And
no, we have no experience with back and forth on this podcast.
So a rusty nail is scotch and drambuie and lemon juice in roughly a 4 to 2 to 1 ratio. The trick to making a really great rusty nail is to use like really cheap and dirty scotch. Like Dewar's White Label should be the tippy top of your spend for your rusty nail.
But why is that?
Because there's no sense, like Drambuie is pretty sweet, right? And you put the lemon juice in there to kind of counteract the sweetness and the booziness and like the little bit of dilution. Like the cocktail will taste out of balance if you don't have something else in there besides scotch and Drambuie. And the only reason to sit in a room, probably by yourself, and drink scotch and Drambuie is because you hate yourself. And who among us has ever hated ourselves more than when we're watching this effing team play?
What a concept.
Would Malort work for this, or is that too bitter?
No, Malort, it really, like, trying to put Malort in a cocktail is extremely fussy. Like, you should probably put on your arm garters and grow a mustache and slick your hair way back. Start calling yourself a mixologist before you start trying to put Malort in cocktails. Malort, the only thing that goes with Malort is a can of the cheapest possible beer you can find, or nothing other than your own misery.
That
sounds right then.
Yeah. Let's go.
I do have one pro tip, which actually applies to all cocktail making. Proper rusty nail is like made and stirred in the glass you're going to drink it with. It's not shaken. It's not stirred in a mixing pitcher. You pour the contents of the cocktail in the glass and then top it with ice. Because, a rusty nail is not, you can go and get a fancy one, but the point of the rusty nail is not to be fancy.
Yeah, it's like it's meant to be inelegant.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually a great pro tip for like all cocktails. If you're making something in a shaker, if you're making something in a mixing pitcher, if you're making something in a glass, add the ice last. Start with the smallest amount of the cheapest thing, in this case, your lemon juice, and then, add enough Drambuie to where, you've got about, 2/3 Drambuie and 1/3 lemon juice, and then do, twice that, plus a little tiny bit more of scotch, and then just, put ice in the glass until it's full. And you'll end up with perhaps an under-diluted, but at least a balanced cocktail. And then if you screw it up at some point in the process, you won't have to throw away your precious Dewar's White Label.
All right. It's interesting that, like, in designing a cocktail, he went for the canonically least sharp tool in the shed.
That is how that worked. We're going to go to Kyle Slaby, who asks... What was that?
What?
That would not comply with the rules.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Kyle Slaby asks, listen, sometimes it just feels good to get a win. And even if it wasn't the most impressive win of the Zimmer era, sometimes that deserves celebrating. If you were to thank Zimmer for this gratifying win, how nice of a present would you give him on a scale of $1 to $100? Personally, I would give him a good $86 for that gift.
Of all like the number related jokes, I think that one, like, it's a nice under the radar one, right? Like, instead of 69 or 420, 86. That's good.
That's not really a question. Next question.
Okay, thanks, Dusty.
Look, I got this. Used to drive me crazy in the first like year and a half we did the show. We would get all these questions that weren't questions.
You're just not mailbag material.
You should know better.
Raul asks, I fear a sense of optimism from Vikings Twitter, so instead, let's look forward to the draft. Even though this defense has outperformed the offense this year, is it weird to say that the Vikings' biggest needs are on the defensive side of the ball, given age and injuries? Also, how awesome is the name of the standout corner, Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati? I would give up all of my picks for that name.
All right, so skipping over the actual football part of the question, so there's like a couple of college players with like better names, which is nuts to me because I think Sauce Gardner in a normal year would be like the Heisman of names. What a great name. But There's Smoke Monday, who I think is a cornerback from Auburn. Incredible name. Not his given name, so that like brings him back, but it's not also Sauce Gardner's name is not, his name is Ahmad Gardner, right? So that I think is better, Smoke Monday. And then there's two given names that I think are better, that they're actual names. One is a running back for Kentucky, Cavassier Smoke. Fantastic.
That's just too good.
Yeah, no additional commentary necessary. And then this one hit the Twitter rounds for a while. I think he's still around in college football. Kobe Buffalo Meat. Fantastic name, no notes.
Kobe Buffalo Meat. I like that.
I mean, we can shut it all down after Cavassier Smoke, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, just incredible. Yeah.
Well, that was the thing, is that Cavassier Smoke said that he didn't understand why his mom named him Cavassier. And
we're like, we've got some ideas.
Some decisions were made. I'm just going to go to that.
Yeah.
We're going to go to Logan.
At answering the at least one football question. I know I'm going way out of my depth here.
All right.
I don't think it's weird to say that, but the great thing about having at least 2016 Mike Zimmer as your coach is that he can kind of paper over that.
Well, that was kind of our argument against drafting all those first round corners, is that he, like way back when, is that it seemed like he had a history of being able to develop all of these fourth, fifth round corners in Cincinnati, that actually it wouldn't have made a ton of sense strategically to draft those guys. And so you'd say, but I still think that it does make sense to say the biggest needs are on the defensive side of the ball, because you're going to lose a linebacker, right? Because Anthony Barr is going to be gone after this year. You can't really rely on Everson Griffin being there long term. Patrick Peterson is old, right? So, and he's on a 1-year contract. You're going to have to replace him probably. So I think that actually does make sense to say that the biggest needs are on the defensive side of the ball. It is worth pointing out that the Vikings have attempted this strategy before of, hey, we've got basically an edge in the market in being able to generate, first round level talent for third or fourth round level investment, and that was at edge rusher. But they don't really seem to do that at corner. So I find that interesting. But maybe they kind of disagree. I don't know. I will say that without a quarterback in this draft, and it seems like there isn't one, that investing on the defensive side of the ball makes sense to me. Yeah.
The flip side of that is that Zimmer's defensive playbook is very complicated, and it helps a lot to have even aging vets on that side of the ball that can kind of help, coach and interpret and, make sure that, all of Zimmer's, crazy disguised looks get pulled off correctly and people are in the right place.
Yeah, that was the huge problem last year for sure.
Yes. Having said all that, as usual, you are still correct.
Yeah, I like having Dusty on.
I don't tell you you're correct often enough. Is that it?
Yeah.
Huh. I don't.
Yeah, it's not complicated. Yep.
I guess. Logan asks, going to my in-laws for Thanksgiving and we have to bring a side dish. What's more passive aggressive, bringing a different meat dish to prove turkey's inferiority or bringing a better prepared turkey? Okay,
I love this question. Personally, for the enjoyment of every guest, I would bring a different meat dish so that somebody can actually eat something good. But I think that the more passive aggressive move is absolutely to bring a better prepared turkey, and absurdly so. I just watched Adam Ragusa, I think is how you pronounce his name, his video on deboning a turkey and roasting it like that, and then making a demi-glace instead of a gravy out of the bones you just removed from the turkey, and roasting and then carving that roast turkey without having any bones in the way, right? That, and it cooks a lot more evenly. You can cook the dark meat and the white meat separately, so you don't have to worry about, that's one of the biggest problems with cooking turkey, is that because the two different meats are on different parts of the turkey and they cook to different temperatures, it's crazy how difficult it is to get everything right. And if you just bring in a better prepared turkey along those lines, I think that is extremely you're going to start a war, but nobody can say why. And that's like the perfect kind of passive aggressiveness.
Just show up and treat it like a YouTube video. Just shoot it like a YouTube like cooking tutorial, and set up the shot, frame it. Like, make sure
have them watch. Yeah, for sure.
Make sure that they see you spatchcock the turkey.
Make sure you're always like cutting at awkward angles so that you're out of the way and they can see what you're doing.
Exactly. It's like they can see the angle, but it makes no sense for you to be at like that weird like twist.
Yeah.
Like, and now we're gonna put all these herbs down. Like, what? Dude, we already have a turkey in the oven. We don't have any more room for this. Like,
I can see. Why are you telling me this? I can see you.
Wait, on your phone, are you playing background music? What are you doing?
I've never heard of this. Oh yeah, it's DRM free. It's copyright free.
Yeah, so. That's what a terrible thing.
Sound, come on. No, my take on this is that it really depends on your in-laws. Are they gourmands, or do they prefer to stay in their lane, respectively, food-wise? If they're gourmands, do exactly what Arif suggested. Just like own their souls with the most elaborate nonsense turkey preparation. But if they're the stay in your lane type, then I would come at it with a different meat. I think. It's been a few years, but I think something that we haven't really talked much about on Norse Code Thanksgiving, which is an oddly important topic for us, is employing sausage as a side dish.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And I would encourage the use of, if you know somebody, or if you got a good butcher shop in your spot, get like a nice game sausage, like some venison or something. And, don't go too crazy with it. Just do the standard, like half boil, half sear, and slice it up real nice so that people can get just like a few nice coins of a meat that is not effing stupid turkey or whatever else they always eat at Thanksgiving every single year.
Whatever it is that people at Thanksgiving eat.
Whatever it is your family always eats,
right,
is the point. But
so long as like at the end of the day, you've ticked off enough people, and you have to say to yourself, I need to get myself away from this place. Like, I think that's really kind of the goal here.
The point is that everybody except your in-laws loves what you made more than they made.
Yeah, exactly.
Just so you're the conversation during the inevitable Lions game during the afternoon.
Right.
People are sitting there like, man, that
sausage. Or, wow, the second preparation of turkey, I didn't expect.
One turkey that was not that great, but there was one that was really good. And then you'll either be forced into doing Thanksgiving every year. Or
that's one of the,
or you never do it again. Let's go to Slaby, who asks, I am making a spiral ham to go with the turkey that my dad is smoking for Thanksgiving this year. I want to impress everyone and show off the superiority of ham over turkey. What is your favorite ham recipe that I can use to win Thanksgiving? That's exactly how you should treat family gatherings. How do I win this?
How do I win? Yeah, no, absolutely. It might say something about the three of us that we decided to start a podcast together, that we all believe in gatherings like this as competitions. And my brother is the same way. So,
yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. I wonder why our family is so screwed. Anyway, I don't know if Dusty will agree with me. It sounds like he already has a suggestion that is probably killer, but I will say that I don't love spiral cut ham. I think that it is very likely to dry out a lot. I think that if you take a smoked ham and just bake it with a great glaze, you can do like the thing where you put like you cross hatch it. And I do recommend like kind of cross hatching the ham so that the fat and the glaze kind of runs in. You can produce some really good ham that way. And you can do the thing where you put the clove in each little diamond. I think that's a little bit too much. But even just like a Coca-Cola or Dr. Pepper glaze with like butter can do so much to make ham insanely good. But I think the spiral cut ham can be dangerous because it can dry out a lot. I like kind of these giant baked hams that, obviously they're smoked beforehand. You bring them in and then you bake them with a really good glaze.
My suggestion would be to think very hard for all the reasons that, well, just mainly the one reason that Arif described about whether you really want to commit to a spiral cut ham. And if you do, I cannot recommend enough that you cook it sous vide, because otherwise it will end up dry. And I mean, if you really want to win Thanksgiving, a moist spiral cut ham is the way to do it. And you can still incorporate all the flavors that you would use in a glaze without all the effort really of basting, unless
That's
you want
true.
to like add them in like a quick finish in the oven or something. And
Sous vide is like purpose built for this use case, actually. Yeah.
well, and Thanksgiving is purpose built for this use case too, because if you've ever done like a multi-person cooking Thanksgiving, the hardest thing to coordinate is oven time.
Yeah.
And if you can sous vide your ham, then you're just over there with your little heater in a tub of water and your ham cooking, and everybody else is freaking out about the oven, and you don't have to sweat anything.
Yeah, your ham will be cooking while you're watching football, and you will have produced the best entree. Like, yeah, it's like sous vide has gotten kind of, I think, it was overrated, and then there's a backlash, and I think we're kind of back at this point where sous vide, people realize it's got really good use cases and some pretty poor use cases, and this is just like the most ideal, I think, use case for it, because like you don't like the textural problems that sometimes come with sous vide. The texture that it produces in this case is actually desired, it's preferred. So you're in a really good spot, I think, with this one.
All right, let's go to the next one, which is from Nate Stanley, who asks, what is the worst side dish served at traditional Thanksgiving?
I bet Dusty has a really good answer. I'm just going to say, for safety reasons, it's stuffing that's cooked inside the bird. But Dusty.
No, it's green bean casserole.
Green bean casserole can be decent, but it really depends on the quality of the green beans.
I'll say it is
If the
high risk, medium reward.
Decent, then it's obviously the worst.
Yeah, I think high risk, medium reward. Yeah. It is extremely unlikely to be the best dish at a Thanksgiving, and there's a pretty decent chance it's the worst dish. And if you have really good green beans, really fresh green beans, it is like way better.
You don't, because it's winter.
That's true. Yeah. But it is like way better to really like super high heat, wok saute them with like oil and just the tiniest bit of garlic that you have to fish out before it burns. And it is faster and it tastes better, and you just sprinkle on salt at the end, and you don't lose it in the mush of a casserole. But I've had good green bean casserole. I do think that you are kind of setting yourself up to, it's like running on second and long. Yeah, you can get some good results out of it, but it's just really just kind of you're stacking the odds against yourself. So that's a pretty decent answer. I used to think I hated the cranberry sauce, but I actually kind of like it. I don't know. I love stuffing. I love rolls. I mean, most of these are carbs, right? Mac and cheese is great. So yeah, it's tough to get like a bad side dish. I've seen some really bad sweet potato side dishes with marshmallow. I also have had some really good ones, but I think the marshmallow is overdone, and I think people don't know how to cook sweet potato. So that, I think, is kind of a runner-up in this category.
Well, I mean, you're never going to defeat the nostalgia value of a weird side dish like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Depending on your family. But, I would say just cut out the middleman, get yourself a can of French onion straws, and eat them like chips.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah. What a concept. Let's go to the next one, which is going to be from Bishop Sycamore alumnus, who asks Dusty, please give your best cocktail suggestion for our newfound favorite spirit, Curly Fry Vodka. Is a martini out of the question?
Our is doing so much work here.
The Arby's brand vodka that's coming out that I'm trying to convince Arif to buy for me over at Surdix.
I saw this on the internet the other day, and I'm actually curious. Because
what direction is your bartender brain going in?
Well, here's the thing. I've never tried the Curly Fry vodka, but like I'm trying to imagine how it would taste. And I'm really curious because if they can actually capture like savory, salty flavors in a spirit, then you've got something going, because there are not that many spirits that you can just buy on the shelf that have that quality. Mostly it's boozy, bitter, sweet, fruity, herbaceous. That's about it.
So assuming it's a success in that respect, right? Assuming that they've captured a savoriness, they've got that saltiness in there. Because my objection to it last episode was that the thing about curly fries I think people like the most, obviously they love the flavor. The thing they like the most is the texture, which obviously you're not going to have in the vodka. So that was my concern. But if they do capture something that's reminiscent of the flavor, what is kind of the cocktail suggestion that you've got out of it?
Well, I've got a couple. Using it unadulterated, I think it would be really good if the way I'm imagining it tasting is true as a component in a shooter with like an oyster or something like a prairie oyster, which is customarily tequila, Tabasco, salt, and an egg yolk.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds terrible, right?
I mean, I've had it. I like it. So
yeah, it's actually not that bad. It's one of those things that tastes way better than it sounds.
Yeah.
Same thing with an oyster shooter. We used to do them all the time at the various Japanese restaurants I would work at. And it would be, togarashi and sake.
Ooh.
And like a raw oyster and maybe one or two other seasonings, maybe some of the special soy, like the extra salty soy sauce. But I think curly fry vodka would be a very good stand-in for your base spirit there. I took this question as a challenge, and if I was to make a martini out of it, I would have to adulterate the curly fry vodka first. I would use a technique called fat washing, which is basically where you take the flavor of some kind of fat and impart it to liquor. It's like an infusion, but you can't just pour room temperature fat into booze and then pour it into a glass. I mean, you could, right, but everybody would hate you and you might get sick. There's a solution to this. You can take pretty much any fat and add it to a liquor when they're both room temperature and liquid, or you can warm up the fat a little bit in the case of coconut oil or butter or whatever. Mm-hmm. Put them in a big container and freeze them together overnight. And not all of it, but most of the flavor from the fat will stay in the alcohol and the fat will freeze. So that when you take it out of the freezer the next day, you'll have a big puck on top that you have to get rid of. And then I would recommend straining the resulting product through like a really fine metal strainer or preferably cheesecloth. And then you end up with fat flavored booze.
That's interesting. So like the concern about how some flavors are more fat soluble than alcohol soluble, that's not like a huge issue?
So there are some fats that are not incredible for fat washing, like plain butter. Who cares? Right. It's like drinking butter flavored LaCroix. Like somebody is whispering, or like a butter truck is driving by as you're drinking. Right. But with fats that have stronger flavor, in this case, particularly bacon fat, mm-hmm, the kind of standard recipe that I keep in my book is 4 ounces of a strongly flavored fat by volume, not by weight, per 750 mils of whiskey. I wouldn't bet your whole bottle of curly fry vodka on this. maybe 2 ounces, which would be 60 mils against 375 mils of whiskey. Just mix them together at room temp until they're kind of uniform. Freeze them overnight, and then strain out all the bacon fat as best you can. And then I think you would end up with bacon curly fry vodka, which you could probably just like shake with a little bit of tomato juice and strain into a chilled martini glass, and you would have probably a acceptable martini.
That's interesting. Being open-minded about this curly fry vodka question, I think that's kind of cool. I mean, we could all use a little change, I guess.
God, I hate you so much.
Let's go to Nolan, who asks, for James and Arif's restaurant corner, it's entirely possible that I have auditions in Fargo and in Minneapolis in the coming weeks. What restaurant should I eat at immediately afterwards to make me feel better about myself and my art? I'll handle Fargo real quick here. Two places I would recommend would be the Worst Beer Hall, which is fantastic. It's full-on German beer, German food, everything. It's quite good. Or if you wanted to celebrate, head over to the Hotel Donaldson. The restaurant there is fantastic, and I highly suggest it. It's also usually not very busy. The Indian place in Fargo is pretty good as well, A Passage to India, but I would recommend those two above anything else.
So most of my favorite restaurants in Minneapolis have closed down for one reason or the other. The two I recommend are, one, the Sous Chef, which is indigenous food made with indigenous ingredients. And it's like really good. Like it's really well put together. I want to go back immediately. We went there for my birthday. It was fantastic. And obviously kind of the whole theme is trying to kind of revive indigenous cuisine. And they have, all kinds of approaches to that are really good. So I recommend that. You can find them on the website, Sous Chef. Otherwise, I love Young Joni. I can't get enough of Young Joni. It's billed as a pizza place, and the pizza is really good, and I highly recommend the pizza. But like everything they do, sometimes they have specials. One of the specials that I've enjoyed a lot there is like a whole grilled fish, which you don't really expect from a pizza place, but it's like a Thai. It's a pizza place opened by like people who've won awards for being able to cook Thai food, and so they have all kinds of like appetizers and entrees and stuff like that are really incredible. So those are my two recommendations.
Yeah. Next question is going to be from Christopher, who asks, this is more for Dusty, and Arif is really curious about your answer here. After you sous vide a New York strip, do you pan, grill, or butane torch sear the outside?
Depends on two things: how good your kitchen hood fan is, like if you have a real one or one that just blows the smoke back into the room, and how much you like the sound of your smoke alarm.
That's pretty fair. Yeah. We have a fairly good exhaust system, so I will superheat a pan just for that. But like, yeah, the goal is to get it at like as hot as possible so that you can get a good sear as quickly as possible and have the even cooking that the whole point of sous videing a New York strip is for. So yes, like superheating sometimes I'll just broil a cast iron pan, and then and because that'll get it hotter than the actual stovetop will, and then I'll put it like really quickly on the stove and then put the steak in there. But yeah, that's an important consideration.
Yeah, and the way that a professional kitchen would do it is in a pan, and they would just leave a pan on the gas burner on high for a while till it got up to like 500, 600 degrees. If you have a gas stove at home, you can probably do that. If you don't, and you don't have like a fancy induction or one of those like giant glass top things that has like quick boil on it or whatever, probably never going to get your pan hot enough to really successfully sear a steak. In that case, do what Arif does and leave it under the broiler till it gets to be 500-600 degrees, and then prepare to smoke out your entire kitchen while you sear two steaks. I usually do a grill sear at home because my dogs freak out when the smoke alarm goes off, and we have a really shitty hood. If you've got $75 that's burning a hole in your pocket, though, there's this thing called a Searzall.
It rules.
It's an attachment that you put on a propane torch. There'll be a link to it in the show notes. So the thing with you said butane torch. I think you meant propane. I hope you meant propane. The thing with searing a steak with a propane torch is it's hard to get the gas flavors away from the steak. And, you're turning a steak into a creme brulee is kind of rude to the steak. So these giant nerds created this like hat for the end of propane torch. It's just a bunch of like fine wires that trap most of the unburnt gas, so that, and it also has like a reflective kind of cone around it, so you get a bigger cone of directed heat and less unburnt gas on your steak. I would call this like even still with the Searsol, there's lots of videos of people using them on the internet that swear by them. I would still say it's like number 3 of the 3 choices. But if you absolutely must use a torch,
so fun though,
to sear a steak, don't do it without a Searsol.
I will say that one method that gets super hot surface is, instead of using the grill, just use the chimney starter, because that can get up to 1,000 degrees. Although you don't need it that hot; that's a little bit too hot, and you end up with too thin of a thing, or too thin of a sear. But yeah, if you cook directly over, if you put like a grill on top of a chimney starter, and you've got the chimney starter going, the way it directs the heat's a lot like a tandoor oven, and it'll reflect the heat back up, and so it'll get even hotter than a grill will. And so that's like, if you've got like a tiny grill thing that you can put on top of the chimney starter, that's one thing that you can do if all you're doing is the searing off the steak. So that's one final thing.
And if you want to get really crazy with it, you could take the coals out of the chimney starter, spread them out into an approximately steak-shaped even pile,
and then just steak directly on top.
Directly on the coals, yeah.
Yeah. That's actually, it can produce some really good flavor. Like, genuinely, it can. Like, skirt steak is so good that way.
Yeah. Cold Hammer asks, I am an avid fan of ginger beer-related cocktails, but have been in a slump featuring only rum, gin, or Irish whiskey lately. Any suggestions to expand this, either with ginger beer or similar cocktails, to begin getting into?
Well, ginger is great, like, in cocktails. It is one of those flavors that wants to be friends with everything, every spirit. I would say try it with mezcal or tequila. If you do it with mezcal, if you're not a big mezcal guy, like if I said the word mezcal and you got like goosebumps a little bit, like not the good kind, find your local liquor superstore helpful human and have them direct you to a fruity one rather than a super smoky one. And a good rule of thumb is that if you're, spending more than like $30, $35 on a mezcal to be used for this purpose, it's probably not going to have the flavor profile you want. I would pair that with maybe like some grapefruit and like a little bit of lime juice. But like, look, the real pro tip here, if you like ginger beer and you have a food processor or like a Vitamix type blender, like not just a, like if your blender struggles with ice, don't do this in a blender. But you can make your own.
Most blenders will struggle with ice, by the way.
Vitamix doesn't.
Vitamix doesn't. Most people don't have a Vitamix.
Well, that's why I'm saying if like that's the threshold, because what we're talking about is like blending up like raw ginger root and simple syrup just together. Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah, it sounds pretty tough.
Yeah. So I mean, a food processor works great for this. Takes a little longer. Vitamix works great for this. Lesser blenders, not so great. So you make yourself some simple syrup, just an equal weight of sugar and water mixed together until they're one uniform thing. And then you measure out some ginger root, and you measure out the same weight of simple syrup. You slice the ginger into coins, and then you throw everything into your food processor and spin it until it's all like baby food, like mush. Get some cheesecloth, and then just perform kind of the process you would use to make cheese, like pour all the mush and stuff into some cheesecloth, like over a strainer or something. But we're going to throw away the curds.
The cheese part, yeah.
In this analogy, and save the whey. But make sure that you squeeze the cheesecloth, like use a lot of cheesecloth, because you want to squeeze all the liquid out of that ginger. And then what you'll have in the pitcher that you hopefully put under the strainer is ginger syrup that will be so fresh and so gingery. And if you leave the skins on the ginger, like if you just rinse the dirt off the ginger and leave the skins on, you'll end up with something that has basically it's basically like cold pressed ginger juice with some sugar in it to make it easier to combine into cocktails. So you get all the health benefits of like that crazy cold pressed juice that you pay $9 for a quart for, or for less than a quart, like half a pint at Whole Foods. And it's way cheaper than buying good ginger beer. It's way cheaper than buying Fever Tree or Goslings or whatever. It's way more gingery, and it lasts forever. Like you can just mix that syrup with soda water, and pow, instant ginger beer that you can just leave. You have that ginger beer concentrate that you can leave in your fridge for literally like a month or two until, it starts to, even if it starts to change color, just taste it. And if it tastes fine, if there's no mold growing on the surface, it's fine to drink. So if you're really, if you want to take your ginger beer game to the next level, I would start making your own. And then, maybe just try it with any clear spirit. I see you've already figured out that gin and ginger beer is really good. But yeah, mezcal is my favorite. Tequila works well. But the real secret is to make your own.
It's stuff like this that I like having you on for, Dusty, because there's so much to see and so much to do. Well, so much to do and so much to see, really, in this world that you just know more about than we do. So also from Cold Hammer, I'm planning on a trip the first couple days of January to Minneapolis to show my kids around a bit before we move up there next year. What better time to get them ready for the move by visiting Minnesota in the middle of winter? What sort of activities should I aim for to give them a false sense of excitement about the move so that the crippling reality of life comes as a surprise after we move? Spend the entire day over at MOA and the like Nickelodeon area and just tell them that every day is going to be like this.
Like explicitly tell them that.
Yes, Jesus. Those words exactly.
Yeah, if you're moving from a place that doesn't have a ton of snow, I think the fun snow-related activities are a great way to trick kids into thinking that winter is good. I mean, I like winter, but like, boy, I think that like, taking them sledding, if you can like, filch out some money for like good ski lessons at a ski place, like anything that can like trick them into thinking that snow is worthwhile.
Like you're going to be outside in this. You're going to spend a lot of time out in this, and you're going to enjoy yourself.
And that your interaction with snow is only recreation related. Like they don't realize that they'll be tasked with like shoveling the sidewalk or anything like that,
or
being forward,
or being stuck inside for 2 months, especially during the winter when it's like -20, -30 out there, like.
Or finding out what it's like to walk on ice.
Yeah, that. Yeah, wherever you go, just make sure that there's a lot of salt down so that they get confused by ice. Because I feel like that's an important part of a move
of that trick. Yeah, of the rug pull that you're pulling. Yeah.
You need different kinds of ice. I don't know. I really got to echo what Arif said. Go skiing. I mean, I'm not just saying this because I live within 50 miles of a dozen world-class ski resorts, but skiing is awesome, especially if you learn how to do it when you're young and you don't have a car to fall.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you just want to be careful out there, too, because the ice we skate is getting pretty thin. Let's go to Nick Howard, who asks, what is your favorite memory from the show? We're at episode 400 here. 418 technically, but this actually is kind of fun.
Don't count the Christmas episodes or the lost episodes.
Well, no, the Christmas episodes bring it up to like 425 or like 424 or something like that. And if we're counting the lost episodes, whether it be Justice or Quality Control or Dusty's laptop,
we're well into the 430, maybe even 440 range.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Dusty, do you have a favorite memory from the show?
I have several, and they're all associated with the London episode.
Oh man,
that was wild.
That was incredible.
Like it was a very regrettable adventure. Like when you go to Twickenham in the morning. It's like going to any bus station or train station. When you go to Twickenham in the morning, there are not 30,000 people all trying to go into the train station at once, and all the trains are working. And then when you try to leave, there's 30,000 people trying to leave all at the same time, and there's like one train working, and the only thing you have to entertain you is all of the people just selling food off of their sidewalks on your way to the train station, and some guy playing flaming bagpipes. But by the time we eventually got to King's Cross Tavern, it was wild, man. Just being, what is that, like 6,000 miles away?
Yeah.
And having just like, I remember sitting there with you on that tiny table with my little recorder, like right between us. And I mean, there are just all those people sitting there, just like hanging on our every word, like we were saying something useful or important. It was a trip, man. I can't say I've experienced a feeling like that very many times in my life. And I'm really grateful to the show to make all that stuff possible for us.
You know, the packed house in Seattle was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Seattle for sure. I'm glad you did and not me.
Yeah, well, it comes better for your brand if I do it, so you can continue to, you know, neglect your Seattle roots or something. The packed house in Seattle was ridiculous. Like that was, I remember because Eric, my buddy Eric, obviously you know Krog, Dusty. Eric lives out in Seattle and was kind of chauffeuring us around for a little bit. And Eric came out to the show and he was confused at the number of people that were there, but B, like all these people like are in like are speaking in like hushed tones whenever you're around. This is weird. When did you become important? It's like that's not the answer to any of this. And going to the underground, was it like an underground like pinball bar or something afterwards?
Yeah.
I have a picture of you and I at that.
Yeah, and that was wild because we had to like navigate through like this weird. Like I thought, like we were getting led into a trap for no reason at all.
That part of Seattle was weird anyway.
Yeah, it would like intentionally, right? But yeah, it was like the statue. What was it? The statue of, was it Friedrich
Lenin.
Engels or Carl?
It was Lenin. It was a giant Lenin statue in the middle of Seattle for no good reason.
Incredible. Yeah, I mean the live shows are really just up there, right? Like the New York show, like it was like the process of doing the New York show was kind of awful. You had to like compete with the DJ or whatever, but I just had so much fun like in New York, interacting with those people. I mean, they came out with like the I Heart NY, but with the purple heart. It was incredible.
Yep.
And interacting with those people was so fun. And just like being out and about in New York was a ton of fun. Obviously the live show we just did in DC was great. Yeah, doing these live shows has been so fun. I think kind of like in terms of like very recent memories, it's going to be difficult actually long term to beat the trip to James Madison and the 2 episodes we recorded in the car. Like I had an insane, like I thought the bit was going to get weird and played out and old and not fun by the time we arrived. Like I was worried that by the time we arrived in James Madison, it would just be like, all right, well, now we have to watch a football game about a team I don't care about. But no, it was so fun. First of all, I do care about the team now. But second,
well, you have the alumni gear to prove it.
Yeah, I have the alumni gear to prove it. Second, it was just like crazy fun. It was so fun. I mean, you've heard me talk about it like 3 episodes straight, so I won't go into too much detail. But I mean, I had so much fun doing that. So yeah, we've had tons of fun episodes and fun times. But even before we could even organize like the live shows, like trying to figure out like being in Mankato and trying to figure out how to do a live show with just this awful mic. Not a live show, but like a recording with this awful mic, walking around whatever facility they stuck the media in to find like a good signal. I mean, like it sucked like doing that, but like I'm never going to forget those memories.
The crock pot days of the training
crock
camp.
Pot days. Yeah. When I would stink up the whole floor of the hotel with like, not stink. I mean, it smelled incredible and no one else could have it but me. And I felt bad for them. Like hours.
I, in that same vein, I mean, it's not the same as being at training camp, but I am never going to forget and now enjoy much more in retrospect watching the recording tick up to 6 hours.
6 hours. I knew you were going to bring up the 6-hour episode
with
Coach Esser. Yeah.
It was at that moment that I was like, holy crap, what have I done? This seemed like a really good idea at the wedding, but boy, this
Right, because this is so early in Norse Code's history. So like when we hit that 6 hour mark of like the one episode, and it was just a Giants preview. That's all it was, right? Like,
much more than that.
Yeah, right.
I remember you guys submitting that to me and me giving you the finger. Like
I cut that one down. I cut it into 3 distinct episodes.
you did, and I still hated you for it because I was still at the time going through the entire thing to make sure it worked.
It's true. I was relying on you to filter it and compress it for us. But
I think those 3. I was like, I'm just going to trust you on this and post it.
That was a lot of editing. But and this is the only prepared statement that I like really have for the night. But I feel like this might be a good time to launch it. The only reason that any of us have any of these memories is not because like we wanted to do these things in hopes that, you know, we might run into somebody at these places. It's because of you all, the listeners. You know, like if it wasn't for the awesome community that has grown and sustained itself, like I feel fine about, well, yeah, I mean, I feel great about my choice to not have to do a Minnesota Vikings podcast anymore. But I'm a little bummed out that, you know, I don't get to be at all the live shows. But I feel great that, you know, Arif and James are making all these awesome memories with you guys, because it was never about me. You know, it was never about, James. It might have been at least a little bit about Arif.
It was mostly about Arif. If I remember correctly, this was supposed to be a vehicle to get Arif popular.
Well, yeah, and now look where you are now. You're at least
turkey memes.
Turkey. I mean, like it helped propel me to get a job that I could buy. Like we were just talking about, Dusty and I, like, so we've had some recording difficulties this episode. Like, what else is new? But while James was trying to figure that out, Dusty and I were just chatting, and we were just talking about, like, man, how fun is it to refinance? Which is nuts, right? It's a crazy how old am I moment. But like, I don't get to have that conversation if I don't have a full-time job at The Athletic that allows me to like own a home, which is incredible, right? And a lot of that has to do with, I mean, frankly, the generosity, because I mean, they don't get paid for this, but basically, of both Dusty and James, like first coming up with the idea at my brother's wedding, and using kind of their accumulated knowledge to run, because this is way before podcasts like really took off. Like, at the time, the Vikings podcast space was way thinner, was way more bare than it is now. I mean, obviously, but like you have to like understand, like there were like 2 Viking, like if you looked up Vikings podcasts in iTunes, there was like 2 Vikings podcasts.
It was the Wild West.
It realistically was already one too many.
Yeah.
I just still thought that we could do it better.
Yeah, and because they had that expertise, I mean, like I was thinking about getting into podcasting for a bit. I had actually, I don't think I ever told the two of them this. I had recorded a trial run episode of a podcast just to see if I could do it, and I did it, and I listened to it, and I was like, if I listened to this, I would never listen to any podcast I was ever on again. like. I heard myself back and I was like, this is unlistenable. And I have a presentation background. Like I did debate and speech, right? And in speech, I learned how to actually talk to a public audience, unlike debate. And so hearing, first of all, the audio quality was awful. I was recording off of a laptop mic. I didn't know any better. And also I wouldn't have known how to, purchase a mic or anything like that. But second, there's no pacing. There's no understanding of what works and what didn't work. There was no movement. And like, pace is kind of a funny thing to bring up, given like we do like these 3-hour episodes, and one of our first episodes was 6 hours long. But like we kept a conversation moving, right? And that was not something I could do on my own. And I learned that I also could not host, right? Like that's just not a skill set that I had at the time, and I probably don't have now. It is great to have a host to work with, because they move a conversation along in a way that allows me to be responsive as opposed to proactive. And it kind of highlights the things that I'm better at. But it was just awful, whatever I was listening. I went for like 20 minutes about how cool Percy Harvin is. Like, it was just nuts. And so,
to be fair, you did that,
but in a structured way. But yeah, it was unlistenable, and so I just scrapped the idea. And so a couple months later, I go to this wedding, my brother's wedding, and I get approached to like do this podcast like by Dusty, and I'm just like, yeah, man, I guess, sure. And their podcast experience was like a huge selling point. I didn't need to be sold that hard because they were doing it for free and functionally still are, basically. Yeah, I mean, like, it's been huge for me to be able to get to this point. Like, the amount of listens it got after like it just got rolling, like it's nuts to be able to kind of be in this space, and it's been kind of a huge help. So like, the idea that they would start this podcast as a vehicle to get kind of me moving is just kind of overwhelming, but also it has been kind of the truth, is that it helped me move my career in the direction that I want a house now. That's nuts. I've got a dream job. So I'm super grateful to them, and obviously to the listeners to making this possible, right? Because like, if people didn't want to tune in and listen, if people didn't want to support the show, if I couldn't, like, part of my negotiation with the last 2 jobs I had, and also an interview I had for a job I didn't end up getting, is telling people, hey, I've got these people that listen to my podcast, and for no reason at all, they give me money, right? They subscribe to the Patreon. And at the time, we didn't have that many Patreon exclusive episodes. Now we've got, quite a bit more. And I would say, look, they get like 2 Patreon exclusive things a year, and I still get people to like give me money. That's how compelling my content is. And I wouldn't be able to say that. I wouldn't be able to increase my negotiating power and earn a better salary. I wouldn't be able to do that without listeners tuning in and signing up for the Patreon and affirming that this is like a space I can be in. So this is like huge. So I love, first 400 episodes, 430 episodes, incredible that we've been able to get this far. But I love that I've been able to do this. I'm so grateful to Dusty and James for doing this. And I'm so happy that like the listeners have tuned in for me to like rant about like running backs mattering or whatever.
whether or not to pay them.
Yeah.
Right. I knew that I would never want to do 400 episodes of a Vikings podcast. And
well, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And you never did.
I think I finally eclipsed you, by the way, in the number of episodes.
Yeah, well, you don't even know how many episodes there are, so...
No, I do, actually. I went and counted this earlier today. I went and I counted the part 2s and everything, so...
Such a liar.
I know, I have the tally marks literally on my desk. Like
he explained before the show that it was precisely 418 before explaining all the caveats to 418.
There's a couple of different ways we got to 418. It felt a bit like Florida 2000. But before we get too deep, I did want to mention 2 things specifically. How excited every time I would get when one of us would type 3-man pod into the chat and be like, "Yep, this is the way we're gonna go this episode. It's gonna be awesome." I remember being incredibly depressed after moving out a couple of years ago and seeing 3-man pod on my screen and being like, "All right, I know at least. I don't know if the listeners are going to enjoy it, but I'm sure as hell going to enjoy bouncing off of beating up on Dusty with Arif or beating up on Arif with Dusty." Later that would turn in my direction a couple of times, but between that and telling the Prince stories,
I didn't think the eating face party would eat my face.
I know, right? What about the episode where we tried to figure out who was gonna be the first one to be eaten out of the 3 of us? And Dusty's like, "No, James has dad strength. This is real. Arif, you're gonna die." And Arif was just so. Arif was like,
I got a text like literally like 2 days ago about which one of us would last the longest in a zombie apocalypse. Like, people are like strangely interested in these questions.
It is a thing, but I think out of everything that's been mentioned, as far as like favorite like moments of the show or whatever, the thing that I always fall back on, and I don't know if it's the best thing we ever did, or I don't even know if it's the funniest thing we ever did, whatever. The Jay Cutler looks like. Which turned into just 3 of us being bored as hell and texting into our group chat and turning it into a bit on the show because we were dying. I was at dinner with my then
control.
I was at dinner with my then girlfriend and was like, it just interrupted, like, just being rude on a date, picking up my phone and continuing to text like things that Jay Cutler looked like.
Just texting and cackling.
Yes, exactly. She's like not able to like. She was like, "What are you laughing at?" I was like, "No, it's not you. No, don't worry. Oh, wait, no, it's okay. I'm
so there's this quarterback.
Yes, there's this quarterback.
Just tell me, you all think it's funny, and you're like, let's not go that far.
Be like, well, maybe if you saw the context of the no, even telling the context of like the smoking Jay Cutler thing, that didn't help. But that's still one of the funniest things because, like, so we did it as a like joke, whatever, and then all three of us were on the podcast like the next day, and I said aloud, we have to do something with this. And it's like, oh yeah, yeah, we definitely do. So I always enjoyed the 3-man pods, specifically the time that we got to do the Jay Cutler thing. Well, let's go to the last question, which is a gift, oddly enough. It is a question from Damian Barrett, who asks, question for James's Detective David Mills corner, what's in the box? I don't know what's in the box right now. This was delivered today.
In the box right now?
There is an actual box that I am opening right now.
Oh, this is glorious. There is one item in particular that I am curious about.
So this was a gift from Damien is clearly involved. I know that Delta BC Dad was heavily involved in this as well. It sounds like Dusty had some form of input on this. So
an effort from let's say several to many longtime members of the Norse Code community.
Wow.
You were pretty honest with the audience about some stuff in your life, and a lot of us took that to heart and wanted to show you a symbol of caring.
And you guys bought me the leg lamp from A Christmas Story.
That's the number 2 choice, by the way. I'm not going to tell you what number 1 is.
The fact
bullied.
The fact that it says ages 14 and up for a lamp.
Incredible. You be careful, man.
It says fragile on it. I don't. It must be Italian. That is fantastic. Again, thanks guys so much. Everyone involved in this, you know who you are, so thank you. That's
and point of order. He in fact did recently lose a lamp, so this is perfect.
This is accurate. So we got a million places for this. Like it's.
My DMs filled up. They were like, well, what do we get James? And I was like, I don't know, man. He's a leg man and he likes lamps.
He's a leg man. Perfect.
I don't think I've ever described myself as a leg man, but here we are. All right. Well, that is... Whoever
describes themselves accurately.
Wow.
Podcast on his own.
Is that a bit like giving yourself a nickname? Like it just doesn't happen?
Would the person on the wine towel date have described themselves as a leg person?
Well, no, she would have described herself as a foot person.
Right. So I think that this is just kind of the logical next step, as it were.
You know what's stupid is I know exactly what I'm going to do with this. And
worst part I've ever heard.
Please do not provide us with... Thanks, Dusty, for acknowledging it. Please do not provide us with details, James.
I've heard a lot of bad puns, but that was...
Yeah, that was
made a lot of bad puns. I spent 200 episodes making bad puns. 100 episodes.
I know bad puns.
183. 162.
Whatever number, it works here.
420 episodes making bad puns. I know a bad pun when I hear one, and that one is the worst.
I never thought the face eating party would happen to me. I don't... This is terrible. All right, well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Thank you guys again so much for listening. Arif, what do you have to plug?
Jesus. Not that. I've got articles over at The Athletic, probably soon, over at theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hassan. A bit on, I was talking about the Vikings Blitz game against the Chargers. I'm going to go into detail on that a little bit. And then later this week, I've got a piece on the Packers game that I hear a lot of people are going to be tuning into.
Well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back later this week with Justice Mosqueda. We hope to be back later this week.
Right, we scheduled it, but that by no means guarantees he will be there.
Physically, in spirit, or technologically, lots of things can happen between now and Thursday. But we will be back later this week. So for Arif, for Dusty, would you like to plug something? I feel rude. Do you have anything to plug other than don't get COVID?
It was effed up.
I'm correcting myself. There's fault in what I did, and I'm sorry, Dusty. I am sorry.
All right. Well, I was on a podcast reality show because that's where my podcasting career is at. America's Next Top Podcaster, Season 3. You can find it on your favorite local podcatcher. And as always, in the incredibly unlikely event that you enjoyed any of this digital multimedia content, please, patreon.com/Norse Code. You didn't think this alone was worth Tree Fitty? And you're never going to get the big joke that these guys have been playing on me.
I think they might have picked up on it by the end of the episode, but there's still a full context that they need.
There's no way they can pick up on what it was.
All these people are all-stars. What are you talking about, Dusty?
And get
I think they figured out the shape of the joke, but not the content.
It's all wow. Take two. It's all cattle. No, it's all set up and no punchline unless you subscribe at patreon.com/Norse Code just for long enough to get the Christmas episode. And then you can it doesn't bother me. I don't get any of the money.
No, actually we put out a fair amount of content of pre-show stuff for Patreon folks. So you would actually get this joke earlier than Christmas.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah. That
subscribe, you'll never get bored.
I just can't stop stepping on me.
Dusty, how would you feel if I got you a Norse Code shirt for Christmas? Would that be okay?
Will you stop complaining then?
What's that?
Would it? I don't know how you would feel about if this would be a bit like a situation of you're getting this shirt with this graven image of like conquerors on yourself. If this would be something like the Black Hills in South Dakota,
laziest conquerors I've ever seen.
I will take that.
That's fair.
That is going to be it.
I would love one. I would wear it with pride. It would be amazing.
Well, that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, hope you guys have enjoyed it. For Arif, for Dusty, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember, case cookus.
Love you.
And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at Norse Code DN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.